Okay, you ready? If everybody's ready, we will start this meeting. Welcome everyone to this special City Council work session for July 19th, 2021. Linda, would you call the roll?
Dora.
Here.
Cummins.
Here.
Scott.
Here.
Fritz.
Here.
Lanetza.
Here. We have two items of business this evening on our work session. The first being discussion of 93 Poplar Ridge encroachment permit, right-of-way permit request. I believe that's presentation by Derek.
Good evening, Your Honor, fellow council members. Derek Gates, Public Works Director. Today I'd like to talk to you about an encroachment permit, a right-of-way permit that the city has received for 93 Poplar Ridge. If you know where Poplar Ridge is, it's just off Harbor Drive on the south side of, or north side of Grand Avenue on the south end of Harbor there. When we got this original encroachment permit, there's some really weird property lines up there, and the owner is proposing to correct some of the encroachments that have been made over time, as the property lines may have not been duly found decades and decades ago when some of the infrastructure was constructed. They're planning on correcting those errors in this next project. So the encroachment permit, you know, there's you can see in the outline, actually when I go forward there, of readjusting the deck, the pedestrian walkway there encroaches onto actually the private property. The private property owner is proposing to relocate that and put that back on city property, and they're reconstructing a retaining wall on their property. And there's some deck work, some patio work, some other on-site infrastructure. The uniqueness of this encroachment permit, right-of-way permit, is typically we handle those in-house, and you guys see a lot of, almost I think all the encroachment permits, the right-of-way permits. We make sure that the city's right-of-ways are being utilized for even private purposes within city standards and policies. This one here, I'll get to in a minute, is pretty unique. There's a landscaping plan that came from Peterson Environmental. They're the firm that's handling it for the property owner. Just kind of give you an idea of where the property sits. There's a very small, is it 12 feet, 15 feet in between the properties, I think? Yeah. The north, between the north and south? Technically 8 feet, but it's encroached on both sides by landscaping. Okay. Yeah, very, very small area of land that abuts their property and their neighbors to the south, that actually gets them to their parking area to the east of the property. So if you can see, like, it's hard to see. Harbor Drive would be over here. This is their access here, and their parking would be on the east side of the property. Very tight location. This shows a little bit better an aerial view. So the encroachment permit came to us. It looked as if they were going to utilize an old, like a logging road that goes up the side of the dune from north to south. They explained to us they weren't going to change any elevations. They would be disturbing some vegetation. So probably, you know, we're good. We'll probably just make sure that we revegetate it. But inside those plans were some plans to remove some trees, and that's why we're here tonight, because we know the City Council has given us direction not to remove live trees, and 7 of the 8 trees in this plan are live. There is one that is dead. But these are the trees that, as you can see in the plan, in the green there, that they need to remove for their equipment to get actually up to the site. The city's response is if there's just an absolute need to remove a live tree for some reason, we can't get around it. Sometimes it's a driveway where a property doesn't have a driveway approach, and we need to put one in, and there's no way to put one in without removing a tree. The city's policy is that we replace that one tree. The property owner replaces that tree on a 3-to-1 ratio, and they pay the city for 3 trees, and then we plant them in the right-of-ways. Some not always on site, but somewhere in the city right-of-way. EGO requires we'll have to have an eagle permit too. We'll have to allow the property owner to apply for an eagle permit in this critical dune area. Eagle requires at least a 1-to-1 ratio to be planted back on site. So a little different things, that's fine if we plant them back on site. They propose to plant all of them on site in the city right away, but we own the Harbor Drive right of way. It goes right up to the border of that pedestrian walkway. So as a prime of a property as this and very public, we want to make sure that the city council knew about the request, that there's some live trees going to be taken down, they're going to do restoration, and not only do they need your permission, but they also need Eagle's permission as well. All of the retaining walls, I believe, on site are being replaced. There's any new ones? Yeah, just replacement. So, yeah, failing walls on that property. They did look at numerous options, you know, to come down the pedestrian pathway. Just the equipment materials is just too cumbersome. Won't fit. Would damage more private infrastructure than it would prevent impact on the public way. So, with that, I'll open up with some discussions. So,
Okay.
oh, here's another plan. This is the actual access plan. Those road grades actually do exist within that dunescape.
Do you have any questions?
These trees are pretty mature trees. And as one of my fellow council members that were on here, we don't want to replace them with twiglets. You know, if you got a full-size tree, it actually helps retain the dune a little bit better also. So I have to go with your staff recommendation of not removing the trees myself personally. There's got to be another way for them to get there than tearing trees down. Trees are very essential, especially in a dune area, retain the dune. I'm not in favor of removing any trees.
Anyone else?
Can you kind of explain the process of what they're wanting to do a little bit, Derek? I mean, or if you don't know, maybe someone can?
Yeah.
As to why they need to remove the 8?
Yeah, yep. Zach, would you like to speak about that? Sure.
Good evening. My name is Zach Vandenberg. I work for Peterson Environmental, an environmental consulting company. A few quick clarifications. The trees that are being removed or proposed to be removed, they aren't being removed for access itself. There's one tree that's like a 4-inch cottonwood that is in the actual access path. All of these other trees, the only reason that they need to be removed is so that way the crane arm can swing across and get all the way from the south end all the way up to the north end. So that was the main purpose of needing the trees to be removed. We did look at some other options, such as doing 2 separate access points, one towards the north where there's less trees, and then another one to the south, so that way the hope was to be able to use a smaller crane. So like on this plan, there was another, we also looked at having another branch off of that going on the north end of the property. But that area is significantly steeper, so it would require some extensive grading of the dune itself with some restoration activity. And it probably wouldn't prevent the tree removal, because either way, no matter where your access points are, the crane arm still has to swing around with the sheet steel. And so that was kind of the main reason for the tree removal itself. And another clarification, not that it really matters that much, but there's actually, on city property, there's 6 live trees and 7 total, so 1 dead tree. There's also a tree we're possibly proposing to remove on the applicant's property. So that one isn't on the city side. Other things to note, I don't know, I did send a couple of photos of the retaining wall, but it's essentially along the west property line, and it's a pretty significant wall, and there's very clear signs of failure in the wall. We talked to a couple different companies. I think we're going to be moving forward with the King company, but multiple different companies said that, you know, if this wall fails, it could be pretty significant to the property itself, because it holds up quite a bit of land that the house itself sits on. So yeah, the other option that we looked at was coming up Poplar Ridge and then coming down the easement. But there's utilities in that area that would have to be relocated, and Poplar Ridge, as you're probably aware, is pretty tight. Oops, sorry. Is pretty tight, especially up by like 58 Poplar Ridge. There's a sharp turn right there. So getting that equipment even up to that parking area was, extremely difficult, if not impossible. So we looked at multiple different options and determined, the wall, at the end of the day, it's if it fails, it's going to be catastrophic. And so we wanted to move forward with the option that we determined to be the least impactful. So, yeah, I guess.
So this basically is just to haul the pieces of sheet steel in that you're gonna be putting in for the,
Correct,
to
yeah,
reinforce
the
embankment?
temporary access path in Brown is like Derek said, it's very gradual grade right there, so we don't need to do any actual grading of the dune itself, which is why it was advantageous. And then, yeah, the tree removal is mainly so that way from that access road, they can get the crane arm to swing over top and actually install the sheets properly. Any other questions for me?
Are you gonna be putting any kind of planking or plating or anything on the ground to, for the travel of the vehicles? Or are you just gonna drive right on the
I don't
sand?
believe we have any proposed right now. It was just supposed to go on grade and then that access path replanted with dune grass if the dune grass it'll probably be somewhat disturbed from the equipment, so restabilizing that after the
Yeah,
project.
I imagine you leave tracks, but
Yeah.
if you're gonna drive on that sand and through that dune grass. So like Mike noted, there's a couple of pretty sizable trees in here. You got 18-inch DBH and 24 and 10 and 8. Got some pretty good sized trees in here.
Yeah, there's two that are pretty large, two red oak trees, and then there's a couple 10-inch oaks. Just off the top of my head, I think like an 8-inch box elder, and then a couple smaller 4-inch cottonwoods as well. So the problem is, the bigger the tree is, the harder it is. It makes you can't swing the arm over top of it. But the applicant the goal is just to get the retaining wall replaced, and the applicant's more than willing to restore things as needed with the 3-to-1 ratio. Our main goal is just to save the house. At some point, that wall will fail. Yeah.
Are all the blue dots on this illustration, are those where you're proposing new trees?
That's where we were proposing them. Like Derek said, Eagle, we're in process with Eagle as well. Eagle does require at least 1-to-1 ratio on site. So those blue dots are showing the 3-to-1 ratio that the city requires. But obviously, the 1-to-1 is required by Eagle, so the other ones could go elsewhere on the property, or on other city properties, or on the property, whatever's preferred by the city.
Looks like a pretty dense pattern.
Yeah, it is. We were just trying to get everything to fit and still meet the requirements for the city. So the 1-to-1 ratio, I guess, would probably allow for more space between trees, allowing the growth. We just put that plan together, to kind of show that we are willing to do the 3-to-1 ratio.
That would definitely give them a better view than looking at trees.
Yeah, potentially.
I figured that, thank you.
Yeah, the retaining wall costs, though, it's not really worth the view. It's not the.
I don't know, but the trees are pretty important to me.
Yeah. The replacement trees, though, if they're the same size, or obviously you can't plant that big of a tree.
You're not gonna plant a 24-inch tree.
And the other
It
thing
took
to
years,
note.
it
the
took,
other thing to
excuse me,
note-
sir, it took years to grow there.
Yeah,
You're not gonna get it. Like a fellow council member I had many years ago on here kept saying, you cut down a big tree and you're planting twiglets, it takes a long time for it to come back.
yeah,
And it doesn't produce as much, a young tree doesn't produce as much as an older, mature tree.
noted. Yep. There are a lot of trees still on the site that we tried to minimize them. Those are just the ones that were unavoidable with the arm. All the other ones were leaving in place.
Well, I guess I'd also like to see you minimize tree removal, especially these larger, older trees, because it takes a long time. The 4-inch trees, probably not as important, but every tree is important to some degree.
Okay. Is there, I guess, is the city more open? Because like I said, the other options, I mean, are gonna require extensive grading and still might not be able to avoid the trees. So I guess I don't know what the other options would be other than letting the retaining wall fail.
Well, we're not trying to make a retaining wall fail either. We're trying to do as little harm as possible in the process.
Okay.
What's the biggest size tree you can put back in there? Do you have any idea?
That I'm not sure. I'd have to reach out to contractors that do that replacement. I just, based on Derek, there was like a dollar amount per tree or something like that, and then the city kind of handled the replacement part of it. I don't know, is that, you wanna?
Yeah, no, our tree replacement, we've been typically getting an 1.5-inch caliper tree planted in the right of way, and then we water those for the first year. See the gator bags out there on those. So we have a really good success rate in those establishing. We've planted as high as 2.5, and then I think I have here with the city have planted a 4-inch caliper in one location. So that's my experience about how big of a tree you can get up in there.
You have good success rate with a bigger tree, or do they tend to die more easily?
No, it sounded from what I gathered from Dan Vivian, the previous facilities managers, that the smaller ones actually were more successful. The one 4-inch tree was just a individual request, and it survived very nicely since we planted it. That one happened to be one of the slowest growing trees, though, but it was the biggest caliber we could find. So we could, if the city council wants to direct us to look at, and, impacting it less and planting bigger trees. Yeah, the 3-to-1 ratio on property, I don't know if we were to do that, the staff would recommend planting all, 21 trees on site, but at least reestablishing what was there, maybe a 1.5 or 2-to-1 ratio on site. And then we've got plenty of right-of-way areas we can plant in as well.
I'm still gonna stay with, I don't wanna see large trees go. They produce so much and they're so valuable. They're a lot more valuable than a dozen small trees, what we get out of them, so I like to maintain that.
I don't think, I for one don't want to see that retaining wall, that retaining wall fail, and cause a major problem with the house. But if we're going to take the trees out, I'd like to see the biggest trees we can get in there, that you could replace those with. So I guess I'd like to know what the biggest ones we could get in there, that we could make fit in that area.
I guess it's down to see what you can do to minimize tree removal, especially the large ones. If you can work around them, then it'd be better. If you didn't take that particular route, it's really not about the route for getting up there, is it? It's about the swing of the crane.
Mm-hmm.
So if we picked a different route and do it straight up the dune, that wouldn't help.
Okay.
Correct?
Yeah, it sounded like there was some grading. Maybe if we did some grading and got it in a different location, we could save a tree or two. Maybe that's the
Uh-huh.
idea we should go
And
to.
then how much restoration do you have to do to put the dune back the way it was?
Yeah, probably the biggest impact would be a warranty on the establishment of the dune grass. Obviously, we'd leave all stumps, that's a no-brainer. We wouldn't remove any of those to help keep soil erosion. But yeah, maybe if we do a little grading and save a couple more trees, we'll see what we can do.
Well, I don't think there's any getting out of removing some trees, but you got some mature ones here. See if you can save those.
Even if it was possible to locate a smaller crane up on the, near the home and use a larger one to place them so they can reach them with the smaller one to put them in, you might be able to save some that way as well. I mean, I haven't walked the site. I've looked at it, but from a distance, but
Sure.
I mean, maybe you can kind of shuttle them with two, so you don't have to take so many down. I'd like to keep as many as possible as well. I'm sure they stabilize the bank there quite a bit, as we've already heard.
Well, at the end of the day, we're not gonna have a retaining wall fail and a house fall down, so. I think that's the bottom line, but we, try to have a lighter touch. Anything else?
Any questions?
Did you get enough useful information from us?
Yes, we did. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
All right,
We'll be
Thank
back.
thank you, Derek. All right, next item on our agenda is Airport Minimum Commercial Standards Report by Pat McGinnis.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tonight, I wanted to present to you the proposed minimum standards for commercial operations for the Grand Haven Airport. You're fairly well aware of the complaints that we received last year and the year before about a helicopter operator at the airport creating quite a nuisance for homeowners to the west of the airport. We looked at that back in 2019, I believe 19, when we got all the complaints and decided that we wouldn't allow that to continue. That operator did file a formal complaint with the Michigan Department of Transportation Aeronautical Division. They got back with us and told us that quite a process, back and forth, where we were presenting not only the nuisance complaints, but also a number of traffic and safety issues, and the fact that the airport's not really built to provide that type of service. There's not a facility for it. He was using a field. There wasn't designated parking or a pedestrian area or a staging area, and it was something a little more slapdash than what we'd like to see. We'd rather see something a little more well planned out, and the question came up, well, how do we go about approving these things? And the state came back and said, you need to adopt what are called airport minimum commercial standards that are very common in many airports across the country. And that was their finding. They found that the complaint was justified, that they found that we perhaps did not have consistent standards in place to prevent discriminatory treatment to some operators. So they said, we need you to get minimum standards, we need you to get them quickly, because you're in violation of your federal grant obligations, which is fairly serious business. When MDOT Aero tells us that, we need to act quickly. So they asked for and received a proposed timeline, and I said, well, we'll get something put together, we'll get it reviewed by our airport board, get it presented to City Council just as quickly as possible, and gave them a timeline that suggested we would be done with that process in June of this year. Obviously, it's July, and the soonest I can get this to you, after presenting it to you tonight, I wanted to get it in your hands, would be the August 2nd meeting for approval. It sets forth, the application procedures, how somebody goes about applying to use our property at the airport, how that application is reviewed, and possibly most importantly, you can read the very clear standards we can apply to deny access, should that be what we decide to do. Again, you have them. They're not short, but they're not terribly long, and I would like this to be on the agenda on August 2nd, as would MDOT, so we can get these approved and move forward with clear standards about how somebody goes about getting access to the airport.
And the airport board has been working on this for the past 2 or 3 months.
They received the initial draft in April, and they worked on it at April, May, and June meetings, made a recommendation that they would like to amend the current document, which is fine. Under Section 9 in the document, it provides for updates as needed. So those can come forward in the future as needed. But what you have before you has been submitted to MDOT Aero back in April, and I've not received any comments from Aero, and I have made several amendments that were suggested at the last couple airport board meetings. Those amendments have been made, so I think it's ready to be adopted, and will give us a pretty clear framework to work within. I think with the proposed current framework, we can, in a non-discriminatory fashion, determine that the airport rides as the airport is currently set up would not be permitted. And I think that's in keeping with being a good neighbor to our friends in the township, where there are several residential neighborhoods surrounding the airport, and they've found it to be quite disturbing to have dozens and dozens of airport rides every day going over their homes. But also, if you're going to land and take off a helicopter multiple times every day. I think you ought to put some thought into it and construct facilities to accommodate that type of activity. You know, I think when it was first approved by airport management, it was thought, well, this is kind of a one-off. You know, we're going to do it a couple times, and it'll be a novelty, and we can make it safe, and it won't be a routine thing. Well, then it became clear that this individual wanted to come back and make this a regular operating business. Like, well, we really need to look at our physical layout and figure out where this is best suited and how we get people to drive in there, where they park, where they wait while they're waiting for rides, you know, where they use the bathroom, where the operator stores their equipment, where they park. And we're pretty much going to say, if you want to run a commercial business at our airport, you need to lease space from us. So you've got a physical presence there. You know, we don't want to encourage, you know, transient type businesses that would be coming through on a regular basis and possibly, you know, creating a bit of a nuisance, which becomes a headache for you, a headache for staff, headache for our friends in the township, at the township offices. You know, we've been hearing from all of them since the 2 instances, and I'm pretty sure it was 2019. There were 2 weekends when they were here, and you all may remember that. There was, I think, one right during the summer, and maybe Coast Guard weekend they came to
Coast
town.
Guard weekend, it got really bad.
Yeah.
It was a tremendous nuisance for all our neighbors.
And Coast Guard weekend, we really pointed that out in our response to their complaint, that was more than just a simple nuisance noise-wise, that during that weekend, things are already on, you know, overdrive. Things are a little bit extreme around town, and to have a helicopter buzzing over the treetops in addition to everything else going on was a bit of a chaotic, you know, thing that was going on that really caused more distraction and nuisance and annoyance for everybody. So it was just a difficult weekend that year, and I think you all knew about it before the complaints even started coming in.
All right, and so this needs to be adopted in a very timely manner, even if it requires a little refinement after the fact.
Yeah, we can amend it at any time after that and just submit the amendments to MDOT, but they would just like to see us get these on file with them as soon as possible. And they've been patient. They remind me after each council meeting and ask, you know, hey, did those pass? So I'll probably be hearing from them later this week, and I'll say, well, it's been presented, because I know you guys like to have it presented, have a couple weeks to look it over. It's a fine read. I would recommend it in a cup of tea. And you know, if you've got any comments or any improvements you'd like to make before it gets adopted, it's not a stagnant document. It's very easy for me to amend it, but we need to just maintain reasonable control.
All right, any questions for Pat?
No.
All right, well then, so we'll be seeing this in this form or very similar to it
August
at
2nd.
our next meeting.
Yes.
All right, well, it's important for us to be best neighbors we can be. We have a general aviation airport open to the public for general use, but this kind of went beyond the pale. All right, thank you. That concludes the agenda items for our work session. 7:28, I'm going to close the work session. We will resume with our regular meeting in about 2 minutes. So if you're out there, come on in and sit down.
The Gatorade, buddy.
I did, you know.
Everybody squeeze in tight, just like at church.
Glass, I got you. You all good?
There are masks out there.
regular meeting of the Grand Haven City Council for July 19th, 2021. Linda, would you call the roll?
Dora,
Here.
Cummins,
Here?
Scott,
Here.
Fritz,
Here.
Manetza.
Here. Now, if we would stand and join us in the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
The Lord be with you.
With your spirit.
Let us pray. O Lord, our governor, bless the leaders of our land, that we may be a people at peace among ourselves and a blessing to other nations of the earth. To the president and members of the cabinet, to governors of states, mayors of cities, and to all in administrative authority, grant wisdom and grace in the exercise of their duties. To senators and representatives and those who make our laws in states, cities, and towns, give courage, wisdom, and foresight to provide for the needs of all our people and to fulfill our obligations to our community. To judges and officers of our courts, give understanding and integrity that human rights may be safeguarded and justice served. Teach our people to rely on your strength and to accept their responsibilities to their fellow citizens, that they may elect trustworthy leaders and make wise decisions for the well-being of our society, that we may serve you faithfully in our generation and honor your holy name. And this evening, Almighty God, our Heavenly Father, we ask that you will send down upon those who hold office in this city of Grand Haven the spirit of wisdom, charity, and justice, that with steadfast purpose they may faithfully serve in their offices to promote the well-being of all people through Jesus Christ our Lord.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. All right, Linda, new appointments.
Yes. This is to appoint Eric Inlaw to the Planning Commission with a term ending June 30th, 2024. Jim DeVries to the Park and Rec Board with a term ending June 30th, 2025. Dennis Swartout to the Airport Board with a term ending June 30th, 2025. And Paul Martin to the Historic Conservation District Commission with a term ending June 30th, 2022.
Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Okay, motion by Fritz, second by Cummins. Any questions on the motion? Call the roll.
Dora,
Yes.
Cummins,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Fritz,
Yes.
Manetza.
Yes. So, we're going to swear them in
If they're here.
if they're here? One of them just stood up.
Eric first. Step up to the microphone. You don't have to say much. I'll read the oath with your hand. You raise your right hand. I'll read the oath and you just say I do when I'm done.
Fine.
Okay. I, Eric Inlaw, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the Office of Planning Commission in and for the City of Grand Haven, County of Ottawa, and State of Michigan, according to the best of my ability.
I do.
And I just need your signature.
Just like getting married.
Any next?
Till death do me part.
Good. I, Dennis Swartout, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the Office of the Parks and Rec Board, nope, that's not right, should be Airport Board, in and for the City of Grand Haven, County of Ottawa, and State of Michigan, according to the best of my ability.
I will and I do.
Okay, we'll fix that. Okay, oops, thanks. Who's next? Paul?
Yeah.
Okay. Historic conservation, okay, got the right one in here. I, Paul Martin, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the Office of the Historic Conservation District Commission in and for the City of Grand Haven, County of Ottawa, and State of Michigan, according to the best of my ability.
I do.
Is Jim DeVries here? I'll get in touch with him and have him come in, I'll swear him in.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, everyone.
They can sign up, we got some openings.
We got a couple more openings. All right, thank you, everyone, for stepping up and offering to serve. All right, next item, presentations.
Presentations?
Presentation, we have,
Oh, thank you, Your Honor. You have been presented with a second supplemental revenue bond resolution from the Board of Light and Power to issue bonds not to exceed $50 million for the 2020 project. That 2020 project's defined in those documents. Dave Walters and Kester So are here tonight to probably make some introductory comments, and the idea was to get this in your hands sooner rather than later and give you an opportunity to ask any preliminary questions you have, and then what I would ask you to do, if you do have follow-up questions after tonight, to get those to me as quickly as you can so I can get them forwarded over to the admin and the bond counsel and the finance advisor at the Board of Light and Power so that they can get to work satisfying any questions or concerns that you might have.
okay, thank you. Dave or Kester? Thank you for coming. The bond information is something that we all could use a little education on.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kester So. I'm with the Dickinson Wright Law Firm, and I'm serving as bond counsel in connection with the proposed bond issue. So before we get started, let me just make a couple of comments to try to put this into context. So these are bonds that would be issued under Act 94, which is the Revenue Bond Act. And Act 94 has the definition of governing body. So sometimes a utility board has sufficient independence so that the utility board is the governing body. And in this case, at least in Grand Haven, this goes all the way back to when you were doing bonds with the Sims project. It was determined that really the city council is going to be the governing body. So you have a double barrel approval process where the BLP board does a recommendation or does the approval, but the city council has to actually do the final approval in order to issue the bonds under the Revenue Bond Act. Let me just recap a little bit of what has been done so far to get you to this place where you may consider this bond authorizing resolution. I understand you may possibly do it in August after a couple of town hall meetings. So in early 2020, you approved the issuance of a notice of intent, and that described the project, and that was published in the Grand Haven Tribune in March of 2020. The referendum period has expired. After the referendum period expired, both the BLP board and you adopted a master bond authorizing resolution, which essentially sets forth the funds and accounts under which you would issue bonds. And so it provides for O&M funds, debt service funds, and a receiving fund to take in revenue. And these are revenue bonds secured only by revenue of the utility. They're not a general obligation bond, and the security is solely payable from revenues of the BLP. So you adopted this main authorizing resolution that sets forth the framework for how you would issue bonds. Subsequent to that, you adopted the first supplemental revenue bond resolution, and that was done in July of 2020. And that authorized essentially the board to have a bond anticipation note issued through a facility, and you authorized up to $25 million. The facility itself that was entered into with the bank was not to exceed 20, and I think you ended up drawing, at least the last count I had, between 13 and 14 million. So that bond anticipation note provided advances for you to start the project and to utilize those proceeds to start the project. You would be reimbursed, or the board would be reimbursed once you do a permanent takeout bond. So now you're at a point where you're considering the issuance of long-term bonds to take out the bond anticipation notes and to provide proceeds to pay for the remainder of the project that was listed in the notice of intent. So the second supplemental, which is in your packet, would authorize a not to exceed $50 million bond issue. PFM would be appointed as the municipal advisory firm representing the city. It's contemplated in Section 8 of that second supplemental that you would have a negotiated sale. So there are different kinds of sales that you can do. One would be a competitive bid, kind of a transaction where you requested bids. The other, for larger transactions or more complicated bond issues, oftentimes it's done with a negotiated sale. So you would end up entering into a bond purchase agreement with one of the investment banks. In this case, I believe Bank of America Merrill Lynch would be the likely underwriter for this. And you would enter into the what's called the bond purchase agreement when you sell the bonds, and then you ultimately sell the bonds pursuant to that, as well as an offering document. So there will be an offering memorandum. It's called a preliminary official statement, and then your final official statement, that will have a description of the project. It will have a description of the various permits that are required, and then it will have a description of Grand Haven and the area, as well as the utility board and the historical revenues that the utility board has obtained over the last number of years. Generally, you go back about 5 years when you do that. Section 10 would give you parameters within which the bonds would have to be sold. So there is a not to exceed amount, as I indicated earlier. The interest rate could not exceed 5% per annum. There is a limit on the discount that could be obtained. And the last maturity date for these bonds could not go past September 1, 2043. So there is a limitation on how long these bonds go out, and given the useful life of the capital portion of this bond issue, I think it was determined that they didn't want to go out beyond the 2043 range. So this is the sum and substance of this resolution. We also included in that resolution two things. One, if the bond issue is not actually concluded in 2021, then if you issue in 2022, the bond authorizing resolution would allow the naming convention to follow the year in which the bonds are actually issued. So the names of the bonds then would revert to 2022 revenue bond deal. And in addition, the intention of the board is that this resolution would not be the final action that you would take. There are two other items that I mentioned earlier. One's the bond purchase agreement, and the other is the preliminary official statement. And both of those take some time to prepare, and take some effort on the part of the professionals to prepare and due diligence on the transaction in order to prepare it. So those two documents would come back to you in nearly final form for you to approve as to form. And then once you do that, then the city would be authorized to fully issue the bonds. But in order to do that, I think the thought was, you know, the financing team wanted to make sure that there was enough assurance that the project was going to go forward before a lot of energy, time, and money was spent in preparing these other documents that are critical to the sale of the bonds. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions?
I have a number of them, or it might be better for some other council members to ask what they have first.
Pat, did you have something specific you wanted to ask?
I did. I guess I more want to ask this of city council than Kester necessarily at this point. You know, there have been a number of things that have come up through the dialogue, and a number of those things were answered tonight. And it might be more productive to get a list over following this presentation. You know, anything currently that we want to clear up, but you know, a number of questions. I think we could send them in writing rather than go through it all tonight, and certainly make that very public, that these questions have been asked and answered, and present it that way. But I guess we can go through because I've got, you know, a couple dozen here that have been provided previously to me, and I'm happy to send those over rather than go through a lot of that minutia tonight, unless you want to do that tonight.
Well, I don't know if we need to go through minutia tonight, but if there's bigger questions or questions that help us to understand the process better, then I would encourage those questions to be asked now.
Go ahead.
All right, I'll go ahead here.
If you get too deep in the minutia, I may ask you to focus on big questions.
Okay. Well, he's here. I appreciate Mr. Custer, or Mr. So for you being here. That's good. So I'll just kind of run through my list that I had. So as part of the resolution, it says that, you know, we have to find that the project is necessary, right? So if we're voting yes on it and approving bonds for the project, we're also making that finding, correct?
That's right.
Okay. And if the city council felt that certain parts of the project were not necessary, could it approve bonding for a lesser amount on more of the agreed upon parts, say reimbursement of the bands for the demolition costs, the substation, some of the environmental, perhaps a small operations facility on Harbor Island, and, you know, prep for the site for maybe future battery storage? Is that something that council might have the ability to do?
Yes, with a caveat. I mean, we're going to have to take a look at the notice of intent, look at the project. You know, at that point in time, there was a defined project. And, you know, again, these are revenue bonds payable basically from rates collected from the ratepayers related to the electric utility. So to the extent that there's any deviation or straying from that particular concept, we would have to take a look at it. But yeah, you could downsize it. I mean, if you remember, the notice of intent initially was done with a cushion. It was not to exceed 75, and they landed on not to exceed 50, with possibly an amount being in the 45 to 50 range.
Okay. And following up on that, you know, say we did choose to go that route, could we issue another notice of intent later for another project, essentially? Say, you know, for example, say we remove the peaking plant portion for now while it was further evaluated and went ahead with the rest. Could we do another notice of intent later to issue bonds for that portion of the project at a later date?
You can always do another notice of intent. What the notice does is it provides notice to the public, and it provides for the public to have an opportunity to put together a referendum, and possibly, if you get enough signatures, then you would have a vote on it.
Okay. Is the bond resolution limited to only using the funds for Harbor Island related items? You know, for example, if the BLP decided that they wanted to build current or extend their current offices on Eaton Drive, or build a combined heat and power plant elsewhere, would that be allowable with this bond resolution? Or does it only allow those bond funds to be used for, what needs to be done on Harbor Island?
So the notice of intent was pretty specific, and it was geared toward the Harbor Island site. So if you ended up proposing construction of parts of the project elsewhere, then I think it would be likely that you'd have to do another notice of intent.
As you know, I'm sure you're aware, we don't have any approved plan at this point by the EPA or EGLE to address our environmental contamination concerns. And because we don't have an approved plan, we don't yet know really the true final cost. And we don't even have an agreement between the city and the BLP as far as who's responsible maybe for what portion of those costs. Does that make the feasibility study of these bonds difficult? Are they essentially more risky with some of those pieces maybe hanging out there?
Yeah, so I've got very limited knowledge of what the environmental issues are. I do know that there, obviously you had owned and operated the Sims plant on a particular site. I believe there would clearly be the potential to have ash impoundment remediation that was actually linked to BLP operations. To the extent there might be some other contamination, whether it's related to the BLP or whether it's related to the city and prior actions, I don't know. So I think the direct answer to your question, though, is if the project is built where I think it is intended to be built, which is on the site. So you're doing demolition and things of that nature in order to basically put, the Sims project behind you, and for safety reasons, you want to demolish certain parts of the Sims project and put up another project. I believe the environmental lawyer that is representing the board and maybe the city has indicated that construction of the project as it's been described and defined in the notice of intent on the existing site is probably okay. And so if you're looking to move the project to other parts of the island or do something where the environmental issues may not yet be resolved, then I think that could become an issue. I think, put it this way though, I think it is something that will be disclosed, and that's why I think the project is essentially confined to the existing site.
As you said, probably okay is, to me it sounds riskier, but we can ask the financial advisors kind of some of those thoughts too. The BLP's been pretty confident that $45 million is their project cost, even with some contingencies. And they've done some financial analysis, I believe it's based on 2% interest, and maybe they're expecting 3%. Right now, the bond resolution allows for up to $50 million and up to 5%. Could the council choose to limit those parameters further and say, you're saying you need 45, and you're saying you maybe can do up to 3% to make the economics of what you're looking at work. If you want something more than that, or are going to need something more than that, you have to come back later for a change. Does council have that ability with this resolution?
The answer is yes. Typically, when we do the parameters, there is a cushion, both in the not-to-exceed principal amount as well as the interest rate, so that, for the very reason you indicated, if there's a spike in interest rates, the professionals don't have to come back to approve it. You could do that, but I think then you have the risk of an increasing interest rate environment. Rates are still fairly historically low. Obviously, the market, there's some volatility. You saw that today, I think.
Yeah, a lot of it.
So, you know, I think those are factors that your and the board's municipal financial advisor would have to counsel you on. Yeah. So the 5% is clearly cushion, based on what, you know, information I know. It's a big cushion. So, you know, it's hard to predict what's going to happen, and if you really don't consider the bond authorizing resolution until August, and then the financing team comes back to you with the bond purchase agreement and the preliminary official statement. That's going to be clearly after that. And then, you know, to the extent there may be some permits that are required, you're probably going to want to have those in hand. And so, you know, you could be looking at clearly in the fall or late fall or early winter, or even, you know, potentially some of these projects, and again, I'm not a financial advisor, so I'm not going to pretend to advise you on it, but sometimes the rate environment is such that, like, for example, toward the end of December, all the financial types in Wall Street are gone, and then sometimes in January there's a influx of what's called redemption amounts. So some bonds are redeemed at that point in time, and so they have cash available, the potential investors, and so it might not be, for example, the earliest is best kind of scenario. You might, if you get into that period of time, you might have to wait a little bit longer in order to hit the optimal market.
So part of the resolution that says that any unexpected balance that's remaining, you know, after the construction, can be put into this kind of separate fund. It kind of sounds like this maybe tier of funds that it has to kind of go through first. But if there's extra left over, it says that, you know, the board may use the reserve account for improvements, enlargements, and extension to the system. Is that something that's common in these types of resolutions? You know, my concern is that, you know, we are looking at up to $50 million. So say there's a $45 million project, you have to spot on, and we have an extra $5 million that's allowed to be spent on things that, you know, projects that potentially the council has not seen. So is that a common thing to have in there? Is that something that could be changed or modified if council so chose?
Yeah, so that provision is common. You know, I do bond counsel work for a lot of different issuers, including state level issuers, but I also do a lot of utility bond issues. So I am bond counsel to the Michigan Public Power Agency, and they've done projects with Detroit Edison and Consumers Power Company and AMP Ohio, and they've done their own. I've been involved in projects for Marquette, for their power plant, for Holland and their power plant, for Lansing and their new power plant. We served as underwriters counsel for Lansing. And that provision is a common provision. Typically what you do is you do have a contingency, but you would, you know, once you go out in the market, you're gonna know pretty close to what your actual costs are, because the board will have gone out for bid on a lot of these components to it, and so you're not going to just borrow another $10 million just because you can. I mean, you're going to want to size it to the project and the project costs, that you have at the time you issue.
And last two questions are interrelated. So is the information in there in the bond resolution related to the covenants? Is that standard language? There's some piece in here about, you know, the city and the board not being able to sell, lease, mortgage, otherwise dispose in any part of the system except for sales and exchanges of property or facilities, and it has kind of some conditions on that. But
That's all very common. Some of those provisions are driven by the rating agencies because they want to see a solid project and a project that's not going to be sold or otherwise disposed of.
Okay.
And obviously they're looking at your rates, rate coverage, debt service coverage, et cetera.
So the last part of that, and it's related to the covenants, this is the language that makes me a little nervous here, is that the CFO, whoever's designated to be that person for these bonds, is authorized on behalf of the board and the city to make any covenants with the purchases of the bonds as may be deemed advisable by you as bond counsel and the municipal advisor. So what could some of those, items be, and could that language be modified to say, add our city manager or his designee on, to make sure that those covenants, aren't something that maybe the city might have concerns with? Maybe the BLP's interest is different than the city's.
Yeah, I think you could change the language. The covenants, again, are fairly standard covenants that you typically see. I would say that it's highly unlikely that there would be additional covenants, because what you're going to do is have a bond purchase agreement prepared that you will review and approve as to form. And that might have other reps and warranties. But I think the covenants that are relied on by the bondholder or by the rating agencies are fairly well self-contained in either the master bond authorizing resolution, which you previously adopted, or the second supplemental resolution. It's laid out. I doubt that there will be additional covenants
Beyond the ones that we already have?
What's in there, yeah.
Okay. Okay. And I can send you a follow-up, just more detail on what those examples may be. The rest of my questions are related to for our financial advisor on this. I can send those separately. So.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Other questions?
Yeah, I have some. There seems to be some confusion lately in articles and emails that I've been receiving from people asking some questions regarding the bonds. As I understand it, these are BLP revenue bonds. They're payable by revenue generated by the BLP, and they have absolutely no tie to city taxpayer revenue that the city receives, correct?
That's correct.
So they then would also have no effect on the city budget, correct?
I mean,
It's
it'll affect the board's budget, obviously, and
right.
To the extent you get involved in reviewing that.
Yeah, which we do not.
Component
Okay.
enterprise fund.
So it's all strictly BLP. It has nothing to do with the city so far. And by the other hand, the city also cannot take any of that bond money and use it to do infrastructure work or street paving or anything else at the city level.
That's correct.
That's correct also. Thank you.
Basically, that's what I was going to say, Mike. It's the bond is a self-liquidating bond and is not a general obligation bond. We've done many general obligation bonds sitting on council here. This is just revenue sharing. It comes out of your revenue, net revenue. So it's actually all BLP. It's nothing to do with the city. I've heard the same stories. Everybody's saying, oh, it's going to affect the taxpayers. It's not. It's going to come right from the BLP. It's not going to affect the taxpayers in Grand Haven. It's not going to affect our budget. That's the only thing I've heard the same questions, Mike, and I have to agree. I read it over and looked at it, and these are nothing to do with us, so.
And I've heard the same thing from people, and I told them the same thing you told them, that we're not obligated to those bonds at all. It's not property taxes generated bonds. It's just bonds that are due by the but people who pay the electric bills, the ratepayers, so yeah. So anyways, but there's some confusion out there about that, that's for sure, so I think we need to set that straight.
You've summed it up correctly. It's a revenue bond deal through the Revenue Bond Act, payable solely from revenues of the electric utility. There is no general obligation backing, there's no full faith and credit. Property taxes are not pledged to the bondholder.
A little bit ago, Ryan was asking about extensions or additional things that might be covered by if there were some additional funds that have been borrowed, not spent, but everything has to fall within the original notice of intent. We can't add anything to that.
Well, I mean, if, like I said, I think that if, and maybe Dave is better to speak to the bid process and how you are obtaining bids from the various vendors to put this together,
But we can't add a whole new project within notice of intent. It's got to be something specific or needed by what was in the original notice.
yes.
Okay. So, yeah, I guess that was part of my question. If we modify the resolution to take some of the cushion out, say we don't want it sold for 5%, we want the interest to be something else, or we want it to have a different principal amount or something like that, would there be a danger that the bonds would not sell?
Well, there's always that potential. I think that probably is better answered by the financial advisor, because I just don't want to
Fair enough.
fray into that. Bonds are still at all-time low rates. But will it stay that way into the fall, or into late fall, or into early winter? I don't know.
A little bit ago, you talked about the timing of the sale, possibly. If you picked your right moment, there'd be people with lots of cash that wanted to invest. Is that something you would typically plan for, or is that just something that might happen if you get lucky?
Well, here you got, this is a complicated project. You do have the environmental component, and then you also have the fact that there's generation here. So there's that component to it as well. And a lot of times the timing on that is not necessarily within your control. So when everything is ready to go, I would assume that you would, work with your financial advisor and the underwriters, the investment bankers, to determine when is the optimal time, once you have received the necessary approvals, to enter the market.
Okay, well, thanks. I don't have any other questions at this point in time, but I'm sure that we will have questions. Dave seems anxious to contribute.
On the bond interest rate that you were talking about, and I know we all had a discussion with our financial advisors who were on the call at the last board meeting where the board approved this, and he suggested the interest rate would be less than 3%. That interest rate that he's talking about is a different interest rate than what's contained in the bond resolution here, and I'm pretty sure it says coupon rate of 5%. The coupon rate is not necessarily the net interest cost that we will bear, that the bonds will bear. Oftentimes, people pay a premium on the bonds to get a higher interest rate. And that 5%, if I'm not mistaken, Kester, is the coupon rate, the maximum coupon rate. So oftentimes, people will pay a premium on the bonds, and so in essence, the net interest cost might be 3%, but they're paying more for the bonds, so they can market a 5% bond. Does that make sense? So what you're approving here is the maximum coupon rate on the bond. And so there is a cushion there, but it's not a 2% cushion, all right? The idea is that there may be, and this is a better question for the financial advisor than it is for Kester, but the interest rate that we were talking about a month ago where it was said to be less than 3%, and then the 5%, we didn't put a 2% cushion in here. The idea is that the underwriter is given a cushion so that they can they can negotiate a coupon rate that's higher than the actual cost that the net interest cost to the city, so that they can market those bonds at a different level. So approving a 5%, and I'm not sure, Kester, if we can put net interest cost in the resolution or the coupon rate, and you might want to.
Well, yeah, I suppose you could. So to illustrate what Dave's talking about, and I'm not suggesting this is gonna happen on your bond issue, but let's say you have 45 million in total project costs. The market most recently has basically generated premium for bond issues. So you might end up selling 40 million, and you might get a premium of 5 million. The stated coupon rate may be 4.5% to 5%, but because they're paying you more, your ultimate interest cost is going to be less. And some of that premium has been pretty significant. We've done some very large deals in the last 2 weeks, and there's been some significant premium that the investors choose to give you in return for that coupon at a higher rate. Sometimes it is 5% on the long end. Sometimes it's, between 4% and 5%. So it really kind of depends on how the thing's marketed and how it's sold.
All right. One other question. At one point, I believe Dave made a comment that these were going to be callable bonds and that was going to be a higher price.
Well, again, that's for your financial advisor, but the typical structure is generally for you to have a 10-year no call. So no matter how long you end up going out, generally, lately, there would be a 10-year period within which you could not call the bonds. And then after that 10-year period, you could redeem the bonds at par. It used to be you would have a sliding scale. So in year 9, it would be 103 and or 102, 101, and then par. Now, the typical convention is to have a 10-year no call, and then the bonds would be callable at par after that.
Oh, okay. Appreciate that.
That's just one more follow-up, kind of along the other lines of questions.
Just on the call option, or on the callable, typically, and I think Holland just did that with their bonds, they had an opportunity to call, and they paid a significant premium to get that call option. And their desire at that point in time was to address the issue that Ryan was talking about, is if you don't really know that you have some things out there, so you overbond, and then you have cash flow over at the end of the deal that you want to pay off because you don't want to pay interest on it forever. So some of that call, the opportunity to call is based on the uncertainty associated with the amount that you want to bond. And I think at this point in time, I don't think there's any interest on the BLP, from the BLP's perspective at this point in time, to make the bonds callable, let's say after 3 years or something like that, to basically pay off bonds that we don't use. But we're really, that would be an analysis that the financial advisor would do and say, is it worth it having that option given the certain uncertainty and that sort of thing in the marketplace? Because there's a substantial cost associated with what Ryan was talking about, is issuing bonds and then do it again in a couple years. And that's probably not a good idea. So they look, and that was one of the reasons why we did the bans as we did, so that we could not pay, we could issue some initial money, get a better feel for what we were going to do, and then issue a final amount. This idea of issuing bond after bond, every a ban anticipation note, and then another bond, and then another bond, that's not a very inexpensive way, because there's substantial issuance costs that I'm sure Kester can talk to as good as anyone. But this idea of that just issuing bonds every couple of years to so you don't overissue or underissue, that's a very expensive way to get money.
Okay, thanks.
Not sure that's what I was suggesting, but if it was determined that revenue bonds couldn't be used for a lesser project, could other types of bonds be used? So, for example, could the city use general obligation bonds for environmental cleanup type cost, and an agreement be made with the BLP to reimburse the city for those bonds, for the cost of those bonds?
Well, we'd have to take a look at that, because, typically, when you get into reimbursement, then, is it, what are the ratepayers doing? They're paying for electricity that's maybe gonna go to clean up. Is it clearly a utility cost or expense or not? So I think, we're gonna have to see what it is. I mean, I think there will be, for example, perhaps environmental loans and grants available from Eagle, and there could be other bonding authorizations that could be done. But again, we don't know what the scope of the environmental contamination is. We don't know what the scope of the remediation that will be required. Will it be monitoring? Will it be something more extensive and more costly? We don't know that yet. So before we talk about paying for it, I think we should try to narrow the scope of what the environmental remediation is going to be after you consult with Eagle.
Seems reasonable to me, but it seems like we're not quite there yet, but
Just to clarify, Ryan, there's only $5.5 million of the $45 million that's being used for environmental purposes. The rest of the environmental is not coming out of the bonds.
Right.
And we will be sure to spend, surely, spending the $5.5 million of the bonds for environmental cleanup. The question is how much of our own revenues are we gonna spend above and beyond that? Not in the bonds.
Right.
The bonds are not gonna be used for that purpose, and that goes into how much in the project that we assumed were going to be for those types of purposes. So the suggestion that, the bond amount of the environmental cleanup is not known, that's simply inaccurate. We know exactly it's $5.5 million. And the unfunded portion or potential sway in the amount of our bond costs will be covered directly from our revenues of our system, using the reserve that we've established.
Right. So what's not known is that, yes, right now you're going to spend $5 million in bonds, and you're going to use the rest of what you believe are the environmental costs from your cash. But if that cost goes up, which it could, because we don't have a final approved plan by Eagle and EPA, and so the costs aren't really finally known, what other options are we going to have to fund that cleanup if it's not cash that you have available after that's been expended? What other bond types, those types of things. So.
And that's the exact situation we would be in if we bonded less and waited till later to figure that out. We would still be in the situation.
I'm talking about bonding less for portions of your project not related to the environmental, so your facilities portion. So.
All right, more questions on the bond, or if we also have the option of forwarding questions to Kester. Pat, do you have anything else?
No, sir, I'll be just kind of compiling what we talked about tonight and putting together a nice, clean Q&A along with some other questions that I'll get right over to Dave this week, so we can get something put together and try to get kind of an omnibus package of questions and answers put together before the question comes to you for approval.
Well, I think the presentation was good, and I think the questions were good, and it brought a lot of stuff out into the open, which good for us to hear, good for the public to hear, so appreciate all that.
Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you for your presentation and for being here. All right, so that brings us to the approval of the consent and regular agendas. Pat, are there any changes?
I have no changes tonight, Your Honor.
Anything from anyone else?
To remove item I related to the snow melt, so we get some further information, discussion on that.
You want that under new business?
Good, Your Honor.
So I is going under new business.
So that'll become item
F.
That'll become item F under new business. Anything else? I would entertain a motion for the,
So moved?
as modified.
Second?
Okay. Motion by Dora, second by Cummins. Approve the agendas as modified. Call the roll.
Cummins,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes?
Fritz,
Yes.
Dora,
Yes.
Manetza.
Yes. Okay. We will now go into our first call to the audience. So at this time, members of the audience may address council on any item, whether on the agenda or not. Those addressing council are asked to provide their name and address, be limited to 3 minutes of speaking time. Council will hear all comments for future consideration, but will not have a response at this time. Anyone like to comment? Come up to the podium, please.
Good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Mark Van Putten, 122 Crescent Drive. I provided council members with a letter earlier today by email, gave Pat a copy, and I'll just briefly summarize my letter. As a Grand Haven resident and BLP customer, I urge you not to approve BLP plans for Harbor Island and the proposed bond issuance. Given my expertise, I will focus my comments on several environmental issues. I'm an environmental attorney by training and experience. I've spent 14 years handling federal and state legal proceedings, specializing in water quality and toxic pollution issues, and have taught for over 15 years classes in those subjects at University of Michigan Law School. The limited information currently available indicates significant contamination of Harbor Island and associated surface and groundwater by several toxic pollutants. The scope, extent, and likely sources of contamination are unknown and require extensive additional research. The potential liability for remediation costs is uncertain, and it's impossible currently to estimate the financial exposure of potentially responsible parties. And I'm sorry that Hester and Dave left, because one clear implication for the Grand Haven City Council budget, the city budget, is the allocation of responsibility for cleanup costs between BLP and the city, and that is yet to be determined. Remediation of Harbor Island should be the primary purpose of any BLP plans for the future. A piecemeal approach to the overall cleanup not only will be ineffective, but likely will foreclose access to federal and state funding that requires comprehensive environmental cleanup plans. Reported by attempts by BLP to negotiate a piecemeal cleanup approach with Eagle are ill-advised, likely to fail, and may be subject to legal challenges. For example, the potential use of mixing zones to avoid compliance with applicable water quality standards has been controversial for many years and has been challenged in a number of legal proceedings. BLP's approach is also deficient in failing adequately to consider environmentally beneficial uses of Harbor Island. BLP's website promises that half of the 25-acre Sims site will be restored as wetlands, but BLP has not evaluated the regional ecological significance of Harbor Island. For example, a recent study by the National Audubon Society of the Grand River Coastal Corridor found that it's part of a global recognizable bird area, and that the core area, which includes Harbor Island, is composed almost entirely of the top 20% designated wetlands that are critical for marsh bird habitat in the Great Lakes region. The remediation options for Harbor Island will be determined in part based on the anticipated future uses. So the failure adequately to consider environmental restoration uses will likely foreclose consideration of less costly remediation options that do not involve constant human use, as does BLP's proposed new office building. This is yet another example of the need for a comprehensive, independent review of alternatives for the future of Harbor Island and for open and effective public participation in the decision-making process. Thank you for considering these comments and for your commitment to the well-being of our Grand Haven community.
Thank you for your comments. Next.
Good evening. My name's Jim Hagan. I'm a resident of 400 Lake. What I'd like to talk about is the diesel project a little bit. I've had correspondence with a number of you, so I think you're all familiar with the points I'm going to just discuss, and I would want to bring them up so that the community is also aware of them. Based on the survey, there was a desire to save the existing building. I applaud that. But what we need to also address is whether what we're going to end up with is going to be a commercial success. And one of the keys to any commercial success in this city is parking. So my comments, my two important comments, really focus on parking. Within the agenda, there was a comment that if we put a sidewalk up from the existing parking lot to Sherman, that the proposed parking, which I guess is Mulligan's Hollow parking, or the Y, would be 400 feet. That is incorrect. On Google Earth, it showed that it was 685 feet to the Mulligan's Hollow parking. If we go around the other way, on the corner of the Coast Guard and the Y and come up, it's 712 feet. Zoning requires a 400-foot walking distance, and I've had some discussions with people, and they said, gee, we really don't know whether that's as the crow flies or not. So I asked a wise old person, and they told me, ask yourself, are you a crow? Ask yourself, can you fly? And of course we know the answer is no. So the people who wrote the resolution didn't, write it for crows. They wrote it for us. They wrote it as a walking distance. The other item that needs to be looked at is the plot. The parcel as it exists is not the parcel that's going to be sold. The parcel that exists is approximately, I think it was 0.64 acres. The site occupies about 1.66 acres, maybe to 1.75. That needs to definitely be done, and I just wanted to bring these up. Oh, the other item, the elevation of the proposed parking. For those of you who walk Grand Haven, you know that the two hills, one going up Sherman and the other going up the Y Drive, are amongst the steepest. Any parking in the city has to be ADA compliant. Any event center with 300 people, a restaurant, you have to have ADA compliant parking. It's a must. I think a project without it is really, in my opinion, a non-starter. So I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you. Next.
My name is Jeannie Sherman. I live at 421 Sand. Excuse me. I've sent a letter to each one of you, plus I did publish a letter in the Grand Haven Tribune because I'm concerned about the diesel plant also. And I don't need to go through all my concerns, except I just wanted to reiterate to encourage you to reconsider perhaps taking down the diesel plant. And if you have any plans to have more public input into this project. Another thing that I did this weekend was I happened to be, I have Dave Seibel's book, In the Path of Destiny, which I'm sure all of you have seen or have a copy available to you. And it was published in 2007, and on page 758 in chapter 37, talking about the electrification in Grand Haven, in the second paragraph, I'm quoting it now, it just said by 1950s there were, I gotta put my glasses on, I'm sorry. There were 9 diesel units, the last and largest weighing 450 tons. The fuel tanks for the diesel engines were buried at first, but as more generators were added, the tanks went above ground, as they are seen today across from the city water plant on Mulligan Hollows Drive. And I guess all I want you to do is to consider the things that I've already addressed, but perhaps really look into perhaps the issue of contamination again on this site for the future. And so perhaps, maybe instead of leaving things as they are, perhaps it is time to demolish the plant and clean up the area and then decide what you're going to do. Thank you, and I thank you all for your service.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Peterson, and I live with my wife Joanna at 1106 Penoyer, where I've lived there over 30 years. I'm coming here today to make you aware of an event that happens once a year and turns my neighborhood into a gigantic nuisance. And I am asking you to put a stop to it. Every year, my neighbors Peter and Sherry Goers at 1140 Penoyer hold an annual street party. It is under the guise that Sherry is employed at Ferry as a teacher and wants an end of school year block party. She, in fact, is no longer a teacher there or with Grand Haven Public School System and hasn't been for some time. We believe there's another motivating factor for this annual block party. June 11th, the day of this year's block party, was Peter Goer's birthday, and each year this party happens around the same time. They shut down the 1100 block of Penoyer for their private party that runs from 1 p.m. to 11 p.m., sometimes later, with no breaks. Anyone attempting to go through their barriers, even neighbors, are confronted by party goers. In contrast, the party goers were given free access to park in the road as they pleased. Unfortunately for us, our anniversary was June 11th as well. The difference is that we had to cancel our guests from coming over because of the risk of them being accosted. This is not a quiet event. There's alcohol involved and children are being exposed to it. The kids are free to play out in the street as they please. We have watched in dismay as children laying down in the middle of the street. There's at least 30 to 40 adults present at any given time, accompanied with loud hooting and hollering. Last Friday, a month after we contacted at least 7 people about this matter, we were given a traffic control order that is extremely vague and has no signatures. This is supposed to be the proof that they had a permit for this event. This order implies one just has to request closing the street and it will be granted. An event that goes on all day and into the night is inappropriate for a residential setting. There are several more appropriate options to choose from, like Potawatomi Park. We are sick and tired of dealing with this madness every year, and I have a feeling that none of you would want this in your neighborhood either. My attorney questions the lawfulness of this as well. This private event is an infringement on my property rights as a taxpayer. Someone's private party should not hinder our access to our street, and we should also have the right to the quiet and peaceful enjoyment of our property. Please understand what is going on here, and please do not grant any more permits that the goers can use to abuse their neighbors. We are fed up. We have copies made of this matter if anyone would like them. Thank you for your my opportunity.
Thank you. Who's next?
Good evening. My name is Aaron Smith, 491 Nathan's Way, Grand Haven. Good to see many of you. As you know, I'm with AgriMed in New Standard. We recently opened the first medical marijuana retailer here in the city of Grand Haven, which we're very proud of, about 45 days ago. The reason I'm here in front of you right now is I'm formally asking City Council to take a look at adopting an adult use ordinance. There's a couple different reasons why. One of them being about 85 to 90% of the individuals that currently come to our store in the last 45 days since we've been open have been recreational customers that we've had to turn away and ideally go to other stores in other municipalities. The main idea is the medical market here in the state of Michigan is getting smaller every day. By limiting us to as a medical-only facility, it's really limiting how we can operate. For instance, we are currently operating at a loss, fully aware that we would be investing hundreds of thousands of dollars into this facility, and operated at a loss with medical only because there's so many adult use stores in the area. It's really taken, it takes away kind of a competitive edge from a staffing standpoint. We currently pay a living wage with benefits, medical benefits for our staff. It's hard to compete when we have other stores in the area that have adult use that are allowed to offer, you know, even potentially more from a staffing standpoint. So we're operating probably a little bit less than what we would be, half of what we would be operating if we were allowed adult use, which would increase the number of jobs that we have currently right now by about 10 to 12 full-time positions. A couple different things for you guys to think about as well is City of Whitehall thought the same way as you guys have, saying, let's start with medical. We'll see how it goes, and then we'll take a look at adult use. Recently, we've been talking with them, and the way that they're looking at it is there's 20 to 30 other municipalities in the area that have allowed adult use, and there have been zero issues across the board. They've kind of scaled back on their weighting, and they're moving forward with adult use, which is something that I urge you guys to do. We have a large, extensive group of individuals that work with us that have helped working with municipalities into making this a reality. And again, I just want to urge you to take a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jeffrey Miller. I live at 1120 South Harbor Drive. I'm here tonight to advocate that you not support the second supplemental review bond resolution. I don't believe the project at Harbor Island is a good one. If you vote this down, it will necessitate the Board of Light and Power to retire the first supplemental bond anticipation note. And what would that mean? That would mean that from their most recent balance statement, which was told to its board last week, they have $29.2 million in their fund balance. If they then use the supplemental and bond and retire it, then what is paid for is the demolition of $5 million, the $4 million for the substation, $3 million for the remediation, and the $1 million for the snow melt. So what does that then do? That then leaves the city the time and ability to look at the rest of the problem, the challenges and the opportunities. Maybe we need a larger peaking plant, but not on Harbor Island. Maybe the remediation costs are going to be astronomical, as mentioned by Mr. Van Putten, and we're going to have to partner with the state and the feds to pay for it. If we're looking at doing a peaker plant, hey, why not partner with MPPA or another member of that organization? Why should we have to bear the sole expense of that? So what is the rush? We don't understand. Council is being diligent and deliberative when considering what to do with the old diesel plant. You've been doing this now for 6 months in engaging the public. The Beyond the Pier initiative, to your credit, has sought a lot of public input. You've been working on this for over a year. Now, with this postcard that we received in the mail today, your attendance last week when listening to industry, and it sounds like you're intent on wanting to vote for this resolution that was talked about earlier, you want to wrap this $50 million project up in 1 month's time. It makes no sense. I don't share your sense of urgency. I don't know what the big rush is all about. What's wrong with the pause? I applaud what Councilman Dora initiated 2 weeks ago, which was, hey, let's have 4 town hall meetings in 4 precincts, get the information out, find out what people want, what they're thinking. The resolution, unfortunately, was vague when it was passed. And subsequently, it went from 4 meetings to 2 meetings that are going to take place during the dinner hour, the day after Coast Guard, and the next day. That is not democracy in action. I'm sorry, I'll leave it with my return in 2 weeks to ask what your metrics are and how you're going to really evaluate the value and worthiness of these town hall meetings. Thanks again. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you. See you then.
Hi, my name's Tom Fullerton. I grew up here, but I currently live at 2858 Jewel Court in Holland, Michigan. It's only been recently that I heard about the plans for the sale of the diesel plant, and I was really happy to watch the video on your recent city council meeting on the choice to go with, well, not the choice yet, but the favorability of going with CL Enterprises from Peru, Illinois, and the local contractor here in Holland, Lakewood Construction. I wrote a letter to CL Lakewood and also forwarded it to you guys, the city council, last week. I guess the best way to do this is to read some of the things that I've written about, thought about it. It's kind of chopped up. I could have edited it, but here goes. This is to the CEO and to the executives of both CL Enterprises in Peru and including Lakewood Construction. So this letter is directed to what looks like you're favoring and the light touch saving of the diesel plant. Thank you so much for your interest in response to the City of Grand Haven, Michigan, regarding its historic diesel power plant circa 1930. I am passionate about what happens to this property in my hometown, but only recently learned about the city's plans to sell it. If only you could have heard, seen, and felt, as I did when young, the reverberation, the power, and awe which emanated from that throbbing, open-windowed, red brick building. 7 huge diesel engines designed for battleships, 30,000 booming horsepower. This was exciting stuff for a 10-year-old boy on the sidewalk outside. One day, a mechanic let me walk through. I was speechless. We are tired. We citizens of Grand Haven are tired of seeing our beautiful, historic riverfront cluttered and limited by never having townhouses and condos. Every summer evening, thousands of people walk, bike, and drive by this ivy-draped, sleepy Art Deco Sentinel and wonder, what the hell was that? My hope is someday soon they'll be able to discover for themselves the intrinsic and heritage-enriching purpose of this once hard-working building. Understandably, the city desires to act quickly before the end of this year, and there could be political and economic pressure to go with the local developer. I hope not. The complexity of this undertaking is way over my head, but I believe CL Lakewood has a superior plan, resources, and expertise to accomplish this project and save most of the old gal. Financing, you mentioned it could take several months with no guarantees to receive approval of certification and designation as a historic site, thus qualifying for financial incentives, federal, state, and local. Other developers have proposed more investment, up to $9 million, more tax revenue for the city, and a quicker closing schedule. This may facilitate their advantage, but I and the residents of Grand Haven are more impressed with your majestic plan and proposal of a more open space with public access, gloriously featuring 2 of the remaining, now silent, big gun diesels as per your rendering.
Tom, can you bring it to a
last
conclusion?
Paragraph. As our mayor said, we have a gem in the rough, but the clock is ticking. This could become your and our masterpiece. Located smack dab between downtown and the beach, this could become Western Michigan's bristling hub of activity. Ironic, but true. It seems to me the City Council will be making its final decision tonight regarding this decision. This is a fascinating heavyweight project, and I'm hoping your firm, CL Enterprises and Lakewood Construction, will be chosen to lead it. Sincerely, Tom Fullerton.
Thank you. Who's next?
Hi, my name is Kurt Lettermoser. I live downtown at 117 Washington Avenue, and I would also ask the City Council and the Mayor to put a pause on the Board and Light development on Harbor Island, short-term and long-term. As pointed out, environmental concerns are not worth building, no matter if it was $1 or millions of dollars. Just the aesthetics. When we first moved here, everybody was near and dear to Sims Plant. From an outsider looking in, I'm glad it's gone. And I just think, why the rush to build on something that let the area breathe a little bit? And as we know, fresh water is a prized commodity. Just ask California and other states out west. And I would recommend there's a 2-minute video out there that what the future is going to look like from Popular Science, where to live in America in the future. And summing up that the West Coast, East Coast, Gulf Coast, there's going to be floods, hurricanes, and more and more. And it'll continue to push future generations to look and live elsewhere. At the end of the 2-minute video, where does it say? Everybody's moving to Michigan. And if, no disrespect to Detroit or Southeast, but West Michigan is the best piece area. I've lived in all parts of the states, and I will vouch for that. So I just asked, why can't the BLP staff work from another existing community building? You know, look at different ways. BLP staff, instead of a t-shirt stop, could be working and living in downtown instead of Harbor Island. I respect the Board and Light Power decision makers. It's not easy. I also respect what you guys are trying to accomplish, but I think more creative thinking is needed, and a pause. On to the next subject, beyond the pier. Great concept, nice use of the land, and potential for great things. However, like Harbor Island, just watch the budget and get creative with the parking issues, as everybody says. We moved down here 10 years ago, and after many years of visiting as a guest, we loved it, but the one drawback, as roughly another 100 downtown residents face, is that we do not have dedicated parking. One city official basically said at the time to us, "It is what it is. This is what you get when you live downtown." Fair enough, but that's a tired approach. Do not start squeezing us further with more buildings when we have a downtown area that needs to be reimagined like Chinook Pier. Dedicated parking for residents and visitors needs to be addressed before you build and then take it and say what it is. Do not divide this community further based on the Harbor Island and other issues that keep frustrating us residents, spending unnecessary dollars. My background is sports marketing, and I probably worked for 2 Detroit organizations back in the day. Each of the organization owners, the Illich and Davidson family members, knew they were only caretakers of their teams. The teams belonged to the community and its fans. And yes, they obviously benefited, but they were there to protect the brand. And council members, mayor, just ask you to protect the Grand Haven brand. Thank you.
Thank you. Good timing.
Good evening. My name's Shannon Donnelly. I live at 15857 Brucker. I live out in the township, but I live under that airport y'all were talking about earlier, so I appreciate you taking up that mantle. But what brings me here tonight is, I'm a customer of the Board of Light and Power out there in the township, and that bond proposal is nothing but a nightmare to me. We need you guys to vote this proposal down. The term of the bond is one of the things that bothers me, because the governor and science has shown us that 2030 is a cutoff line. 2030 is when we're looking at a very, very cataclysmic event, and it's called the change in the climate. Michigan will be a place where climate refugees come. Grand Haven will be one of those places, like you were just saying, where climate refugees are going to be looking for a place to be. And I'd like Grand Haven to be that place. Last week I was kayaking from my home waters at Potawatomi Bayou, and I went ahead and took the bayou all the way down to the river, down the river, under the bridge, through the channel, right past Harbor Island, because I'd never seen what was on the other side. And I was kind of coasting along looking, and just with the small amount of rain we've had in the last 3 weeks, we've got intermingling going on. The river and the boundaries between those ponds and what's going on out on Harbor Island is gone. There's no protection. Upstream, they've spent millions of dollars in Grand Rapids remediating the water, and here we are at the mouth of this river, the protectors of this river. And we're looking at what's gonna happen next out there. Let the island rest. Let nature take its way. Let it heal itself. In April, the engineering company that BLP has contracted with presented what their part is for cleaning up and taking care of the mess that's out there with the ponds and everything. And as an environmentalist, I was watching very closely to their line items on the budget for this. And they've showed that they've done some water quality tests out there. Nothing was beyond toxic limits. Yeah, we know what that means now, don't we? But more importantly, what struck me is that there is no line item in that budget or in these proposals we're talking about for continued monitoring. PFAS, PFOS, and those other chemicals are what's called legacy pollution, a term we should not be using in this state, and especially when we're talking about our water and our land. Legacy pollution isn't going away anywhere. It accumulates in the biology along the streams. So the PFAS, PFOS goes into the plants, the fish eat the plants, and it goes on the food chain, and that's how we end up with poison. $29 million in their cash fund is not going to be enough to remediate what's going on out there. Whether it's their responsibility or not, they're kind of stuck with the problem, and so is the city council technically. $5 million in their bond proposal is not enough. Ask the people who live along the Kalamazoo River, ask the people of Flint, ask the people in White Lake, of which my brother, this is the anniversary of his death from a brain tumor he got from swimming and eating the fish in White Lake. Ask anyone living in Muskegon Lake who is now benefiting from the $7.2 million that they have put into that lake. It can be done, but it's not going to be done with 29.5, these little piecemeal bits, and it's also not going to be done by trying to buy step and make their piecemeal with Eagle and the EPA. So it's up to you, as the guardians of the legacy of Harbor Island, to stamp this proposal no. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Ken Terpstra, 419 Sandpiper, and talking a bit about the Harbor Drive diesel plant. I think one of the big issues that has been mentioned tonight is parking. I walked past her today. There's 23 parking spots in the current parking lot, and I know it's going to be changed somewhat. But if they're looking at a 300-person event center, I think probably the ordinance calls for what, one parking space for every 2.5 people? That'd be 120 parking spaces just for the attendants. Now you've got a restaurant that has employees and people eating at it. You've got the people working in the event center. You know, maximum you're going to get 75, 85 parking spaces into that particular lot, and the rest are going to have to go where? And as we heard before, the YMCA parking lot is really too far away. So I think we've got to look at something. I talked to one of the council members, and the comment was, well, we've already got a parking problem. Well, we do, but why do we want to build on that parking problem? We've got to look at solving it, not just kicking the can down the road and saying, well, we got a problem already, what's more of a problem? It's like the pension fund being underfunded. It's $26 million underfunded. Well, we're underfunded already, so gosh, we might as well go more underfunded. You can't live that way. That's not your job. And I think we've really got to look at a viable operation. And I know it's a majestic building. It's a great building. I think Capstone's proposal, you know, used some of the brick over, made it kind of look like it was. If they're going to change it to different floors, that building's definitely going to change. I mean, the brick might stay the same, but it's not going to look the same. But I would just really, you know, urge you to not just throw away this whole parking thing. That's an area where there's not a lot of parking. It's a residential area. An event center, just in our opinion as a condo association, you know, is not going to fit in that location. So, thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? If no one is coming forward to address council, I will close the call to the audience. There will be a second call to the audience at the end of the meeting, just before we adjourn. So there will be another opportunity to speak to council if no one comes forward now. Oh, we got one coming up. Or not. Okay, we're going to move on then. Thank you all for your comments. And as I said, there will be another opportunity. So we are now up to the consent agenda.
Before I read it, item B, you need to fill in the blanks as who you're going to appoint as the voting delegate and alternate for the MML conference meeting.
Okay, typically the mayor would be the voting delegate.
If he's going, and maybe the pro tem would be the alternate if he's going.
I'm going.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it'd be Manetza and Fritz.
Perfect.
Unless somebody else is anxious desire to go and vote yes on these things.
That's all you do.
This voting at the Michigan Municipal League is largely ceremonial and symbolic, but I'm willing to do it.
Thank you for being so kind.
I've only sat on one. I had a chance. The mayor couldn't make it at the time, not Bob, but the other mayor. And all you do is just sit there, and you say yes.
I mean, you do have the opportunity to get up and make comments.
Yeah.
It's pretty formal.
Yeah, it is.
All right. So, you got that?
Got that.
Okay.
Okay.
Now could you read the consent agenda?
Yes. Approve the bills memo in the amount of $309,977.15. Appoint Bob Manessa as voting delegate and Mike Fritz as alternate to represent the city of Grand Haven at the annual Michigan Municipal League meeting to be held on September 22nd, 2021 in Grand Rapids. Approve the purchase of one Dell EMC Power Vault storage array for the city's network infrastructure from low bidder Riemann in the amount of $11,601. Approve the purchase of a 5-ton dump truck in the not-to-exceed price of $90,449.18 from West Michigan International for the truck chassis, and $77,440 from Truck and Trailer Specialties for the dump body and hydraulic system. Approve the Loudoun District Library, Ottawa County Humane Society's Dog and Cat Vaccination Clinic in Central Park on Friday, July 30th, 2021, from 2:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. and waive the park rental fee of $500. Extend the free Friday night concert series through Friday, September 17th, and include an additional date for Saturday, July 24th, 2021. Expand the layout of the Flea on 7th special event to include a portion of lot number 12, which is the Bookman parking lot, for the special event being held on Sunday, August 1st, 2021, from 10 o'clock a.m. to 4 o'clock p.m. And approve and submit Approve and submit language to the Michigan Governor and Attorney General for proposed amendments to the city charter to remove references to the city hospital, Ottawa County Board of Canvassers, and the Municipal Court of the City of Grand Haven, eliminate gender-biased pronouns, and restate requirement to have the city attorney present at all meetings, and place said amendments before city voters on November 2nd, 2021.
Linda, when you're reading that last item, you said Ottawa County Board of Canvassers. Did you mean supervisor?
Yes, I did.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, I'm just used to dealing with that with elections. Sorry. We don't want to eliminate them.
That's your world. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Support.
Okay, motion by Fritz, second by Dora. Questions on any of these items? If not, then I guess we're ready to vote.
Scott?
Yes.
Fritz?
Yes.
Dora?
Yes.
Cummins?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. All right, brings us to our first item of new business.
First item is to approve the low bid and award the construction contract to Jackson Murky Contractors for the Robinson Landing Utility Extension in the not-to-exceed amount of $217,672.75, and authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the necessary documents. The administration recommends approval.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Scott, second by Fritz. Do you want to read this, or shall I go directly to Derek?
You go right with Mr. Gatos.
Okay, Derek.
Good evening again, Your Honor and Council. Derek Gatos, Public Works Director for the city. We rebid the last Robinson Landing Utility Extension was actually a good time. We had to engineer some sewers in that, on that project because some easements weren't obtained that we were anticipating. So we rebid it. It came in just over the engineer's estimate, but well below what the original contract was. We did have 2 bidders out of 9 contractors we contacted. One of them was the same bidder. The low bidder from last time did not bid. And a local firm that we're very familiar with, Jackson Murphy, who was intending on bidding on the last project, but did not at the last minute, did submit a low bid of $217,000. So looking forward to working with Jackson Murphy this fall to get that utility extended to our new subdivision on Comstock.
Okay, thanks. And just so we're clear, there was a scope change on this project due to change in the direction of the utility?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, questions for Derek? Anything? We're ready to vote? Linda?
Fritz?
Yes.
Dora?
Yeah.
Cummins?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. All right, next item.
Next item is to establish a temporary moratorium on acceptance of new lot split applications for residential lots in the MDR, MFR, SE, OT, NMU, and OS zoning districts unless the applicant proposes to divide an existing single-family dwelling into a 2-unit dwelling. The administration recommends approval.
I think you left about the middle part of that one out.
I did, didn't I?
And also the 6-month, I'm sorry, I meant to have that included in reading the resolution, that between temporary and moratorium be a temporary 6-month moratorium, just so that those watching from homes know how long you're proposing this moratorium to go. It would be 6 months.
Okay, but the rest of this was regarding new 2-unit dwelling of applications.
Right.
I don't think you read that part.
Okay, can you read it?
Or if you did, I missed
I
it.
missed this part, okay. That's what I get for going on vacation and coming back on
Jennifer writes
agenda
really
day.
long resolutions.
She does, but they're very
Okay,
thorough.
the resolution should be establish a temporary moratorium, you said 6 months?
Yeah.
6-month moratorium on acceptance of new lot split applications for residential lots in the MDR, MFR, SE, OT, NMU, and OS zoning districts, and new 2-unit dwelling applications in the LDR, MDR, SE, OT, and OS zoning districts, unless the applicant proposes to divide an existing single-family dwelling into a 2-unit dwelling. The administration recommends approval.
All right, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Doris, second by Scott.
Good evening.
Jennifer.
Thank you. Jennifer Howland, Community Development Manager for the city. Back in January of this year, a zoning ordinance update was adopted by the City Council, and it included reductions in minimum lot width, lot area, and also allowed 2-unit dwellings in more zoning districts. In the meantime, some of our community members have expressed concern about these changes potentially leading to the neighborhoods changing in character in ways that we didn't anticipate or perhaps weren't in favor of. So what we're looking to do is to take 6 months or less to work on potential changes to the zoning ordinance with the Planning Commission and the community to figure out how to right-size these changes. Perhaps some of the things that were adopted may not be the best fit for our community in some areas. So I've tailored this as narrowly as possible, I feel, to only affect zoning districts that have received changes in 2021. There are some districts that we didn't change at all, so the assumption is that those have been just fine for the past several years and to not limit people from developing them. So the first parameter is lot split applications for residential lots in the MDR, MFR, Southside, East Town, Old Town, neighborhood mixed use, and office service zoning districts. That allows us to look at lot area and lot width, because one of the changes was that we reduced the minimum lot width in some of the districts, some cases just by 1 foot, which allowed splitting in more ways than prior. And then a moratorium on 2-unit dwelling applications in the low-density residential, moderate-density, South Side, East Town, Old Town, and office service districts, unless it's an existing single-family house that's looking to split within itself. So this moratorium would prevent new construction or adding on to a single-family home with a whole new unit in the back, for example, or on top. And the districts that I'm not listing here weren't affected, as I mentioned, so we're hoping that this will give the Planning Commission, staff, and the community time to bring some adjustments to the City Council for consideration.
Okay, thanks. Questions? Comments?
No, I understand.
We talked about this somewhat at our last meeting, and the Planning Commission discussed it also at their last meeting. So it seems like an appropriate step at this time. Any other comments?
Yeah, I didn't attend the last planning commission personally, but, meeting, but I however did watch it on, the city YouTube channel, so, I know there was a request that they had made to, possibly get together with council for a joint meeting. I have no problem with that if they want to do that as well, so. I'd like to be a part of it.
I think this is good too, perhaps we need to be a little more prescriptive as far as, where some of the changes occur, especially if some of the goals were related to more attainable housing, but I appreciate the approach of letting our planning commission and staff evaluate this further instead of more of a, quick knee-jerk reaction just to pull it all back. I think there's probably still some good that can come out of some of the changes. It just needs a closer look and more targeted approach on where maybe some of that occurs. So I think this allows us time to do that.
Okay. I agree, and also I want to say thank you to the landowners that were brought to attention, especially on the south end up there where the big lots are, and that, Kendrick Creason and family and their houses and that. I would say thank you for them bringing it to the attention of how it would really destroy their neighborhood if they end up splitting those lots all up and making totally different up there. So this is a good move for us, at least to take a good look at it and try and keep the neighborhoods intact. So that's what we're supposed to do. So,
I agree. We don't want to wreck our small town city here. We want to keep our neighborhoods close to what we have as we can.
All right, are we ready to vote? Linda?
Dora?
Yes.
Cummins?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Fritz?
Yes.
Netza?
Yes. Okay. Next item.
The next item is to approve the Beyond the Pier Waterfront Master Plan. The administration recommends approval.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Cummins,
Second.
second by Dora. Now, the language of this resolution is to approve the Beyond the Pier Waterfront Master Plan. And I guess that the one question might be is there a difference between approving, accepting, adopting? Is that a semantic difference or is that a meaningful difference?
We've had quite a lot of discussion about that. This is approving. You're probably adopting is the strongest thing you could do. And it is semantic. Approving, accepting, receiving, filing, rejecting. These are all things you might do with a plan that we bring to you, but we're recommending adoption. You invested quite a bit in this plan. You spent a lot of time on it. It's made up of pure engagement, feedback you got from the community, people's opinions and what they had to say. So it doesn't really cause anything to happen necessarily other than say this is a general ideal of what we think, the 30, 40,000 foot view of what might occur down there along the waterfront, and we'd like to get moving forward. And I would imagine that the next time we do a master plan update, we would likely refer to this. In the past, we've done that. We've referred to those other plans, the downtown plan, another waterfront plan that was put in place, the Mulligan's Hollow plan. You've had a lot of these that we use as guidelines, but none of it has any force of compelling you to do something in the future. It's thought that's been put down on paper, and it doesn't say that you're going to do any particular thing. That's not to say that future councils won't refer to it and use it as support for things they might want to vote on, but it still, doesn't cause anything immediately to happen. So it is a semantic issue, and we're okay with however you decide to move forward. We just would like to move forward.
All right. Jennifer?
Yes, so just a brief reminder of what we've gone through. The resolution covers the history of this year-long process. The Beyond the Pier Waterfront Master Plan is primarily focusing on the waterfront from the stadium up to where the marinas start, the private marinas. And our scope included some downtown reviews because this part of our community is all connected to the rest of the downtown and the Old Town neighborhood and beyond. We had lots of interesting public engagement over the past year. We faced some challenges with the pandemic, but we were able to accomplish in-person meetings before the pandemic because this did actually start in 2019. I believe so. So we're really pleased with the outcome of this project. I think focusing on the waterfront itself is the right thing to do. And Malia from Williamson Works is here tonight. She's been presenting the last couple times to you all. We've got the support of the Planning Commission, the MSDDA, the Historic Conservation District Commission. We worked with a steering committee as well. So we're looking forward to having you accept this or approve this and start to look at ways to integrate it into the rest of the master plan and our ordinances. And there's also another request on the agenda tonight for a request for proposals to develop a portion of this based on this vision that the community is supporting.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments?
Yeah, I still got questions. There isn't any changes from the last time we had this conversation before, and as one of our constituents talking about parking and stuff like that, how many parking spots are going to be on around Harbor Avenue and Jackson through that area? How many parking spots are you planning to put on that street?
I don't have that number right in front of me, Mike, but Malia may have that. She can come up and discuss that.
Well, here's what point I'm getting at.
Sure.
Were any of you guys here this weekend and see the backup cars on that street? Nobody's gonna park in those spots. I'll tell you what, you park them, you're never gonna get out. You can't get through there. It's insane. Cars were backed up way past 3rd Street, and sometimes I've seen them all the way down to 6th Street down there coming into town. And then when they leave town, it's the same business. Those parking spots are useless. And also, you took parking spots away from by the depot, as I said before, and you're cutting 38 spaces out of the whole program, and plus you got spaces there. There's not enough parking to support anything you're doing down there, and it's really gonna change everything in that whole area down there. It's not gonna be good. Right now, I don't think parking, we're talking about parking, we have not enough parking as it is, and you're causing more of a problem there. I will not support this. I would like to make a motion just to file it myself. So if we want to go after it, we can look at it. But this is not a good plan. It was not good at all. And I said at the last meeting, and I'm sticking to my guns today. There's too many things that did not go right on there.
Anyone else?
I kind of feel the same way. There's not enough parking down there. I think there's too much activity without enough parking. Until we figure out a parking plan down there, I don't think it's a good idea.
Council, thank you for taking a review of this tonight. I do want to remind everyone, when we were looking at the parking down at Chinook Pier, everything we looked at does meet the zoning ordinance requirements. We did expand upon some of the existing parking that's down there today. And then we also do talk about potential public-private partnerships between covenant-like parking to be able to open that up as a possibility moving forward. We also are recommending multiple different ways for people to have mobility downtown that are beyond parking. So it was a big topic of conversation during our program, and it is something that we've paid keen attention to throughout this project. So I do understand the sentiment towards parking, but we want to make sure that we're also focusing on the waterfront for this project as well. So thank you.
We also have a marina down there with charter boats down there, which also have people that come here to support our town. Not only do they fish, but they also come in and spend money here. It's already had a study on that, on how many millions of dollars that they come in here during the year and spend it in our restaurants and our downtown area and everything else, in our hotel rooms, whatever it is. But it has shown that we've had good turnout from them. By having less parking spots down there, they're all going to be competing down there to have that. So I just don't think it's going to be very workable.
We did provide more parking near the farmer's market, and obviously, I want to remind everyone, this is a schematic plan. When you guys actually do dive into the physical design of these things, how they manifest in the future, it could be different, and parking could be something that is a major consideration moving forward.
You're absolutely correct. It could be different. The Covenant Life parking lot could not be parking. They could turn around and sell that to whatever they want to then, and it's not a guarantee to be a parking lot forever, even though it's height limit on it, but they could still do something that they wanted to on there. So I don't want to rely on private property. We're talking about public property.
I have maybe a little bit of a different take. I appreciate the vision that's here. I think it started with public engagement, a ton of it, from community surveys, in-person engagement, design charrettes where the community was able to help design the items that are here. The group met with middle school students, high school students, our youth, our future, who are going to be, maybe seeing some of this vision, come true in future years. And so I think it's based on what the community desires. A few points on parking. We have a boardwalk that people walk miles on. We have a downtown that's walkable, that's multiple blocks. On Saturday, I took a couple pictures, and I'll send it to the rest of council, and I'll share it with anybody else. Found it very interesting. Our downtown was very busy. Our waterfront was extremely busy. The lot, a few blocks up, 4 or 5 blocks up, the county lot by the courthouse, had 4 or 5 cars in it. That's it. Completely empty. It can be used for parking. The lot right in front of the county building, empty. So parking study after parking study has shown that we have the parking that we need in a lot of areas of our city. It's a matter of folks have to walk a few extra blocks, maybe get to their destination. And in fact, I think a lot of studies have shown that there's economic benefit when folks are actually walking by storefronts and going to another destination. When I go down to Saugatuck and go on boat rides, I don't expect to park right in front of that boat ride that I'm going to go on. I expect that I'm probably going to have to park somewhere and walk, and I notice and observe and find new and cooler things to check out when I'm done. When I go to downtown Grand Rapids, downtown Holland, downtown Muskegon, I expect to do the same. I expect the same when I go downtown on busier times here, that I'm not going to be able to park exactly right in front of my destination, but every time I walk downtown, I see new things. I see a new storefront. I see something new that I want to check out. There is economic benefit to that. We have a walkable waterfront. We want people to be able to explore it and check it out. I think that this vision allows for that. The Peerless Flats development that's going in has a lot of on-street parking that's going to be added on right in that area. There's a public parking lot through a public-private partnership that was developed and making that development happen. That's going to add public parking as well. So I don't want to kill a good vision over parking today. This is a long-term vision. Are there some parking issues that maybe we need to work out? Yes. But do I want to build more asphalt and concrete right along our waterfront? No. I don't want to use that for parking purposes. I think there's better uses of our waterfront. So I will be supporting this plan tonight. I think it's a good vision, and it's a good direction forward. It's not perfect. Nothing is. Not everybody's going to be happy. But I appreciate the work that's been done on this. There's been some mistakes along the way. It needed a greater focus on the water. And moved out of downtown. It has that now. We've had very few comments, despite this being readily available for anybody to take a look at and review. Since the revisions have been made, so I support what's here. Thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody for their comments, and I understand your concerns for the parking. It's a plan. It's not a finished document. Many things in this plan may or not be in the same location where they are now. It's all subject to discoveries and changes along the way that could affect, many things leading up to the completion of this plan. So we have to start somewheres, and starting somewheres is saying, okay, here's our plan. Where do we go? Let's put it out, see what people come back with. If we don't like the parking, we can make adjustments and say, we need more parking. If we think it's going to work and be fine, we can go with it. So until we start someplace, we're never going to get anywhere. So I'm going to vote to support this and moving along in a direction so that we can get something that people can look at, and we can look at it and say, yeah, this looks great. Nope, try again.
All right, well, I'm looking at the actual plan you have online. To address the parking is an issue in many ways. I like Ryan's perspective that there is parking out there if you're willing to walk to it. There's ways of getting around, and I think that the piece that's interesting is, for one thing, we used to have buildings there and they're gone. And so the parking demand that was there isn't there now, but we had parking for it before. Those parking spaces are still there. I understand the plan changes where things are and such. Looking at what's in your table here, it shows public off-street parking declining by 41 spaces in this area. Public on-street parking picking up by 84, of which 49 are the ones on Harbor Drive that Mike says nobody will use. And yeah, I think there are times when that would be challenging. That's why I was an early advocate for taking the boulevard out, making room for a maneuvering lane. Whether that goes anywhere or not, if you do the math here, I'm coming out about 6 parking spaces short, not 100, not any particular one. I'm coming up with, you got 84 to the good, you've got 41 to the bad. You got, if you take out the 49 spaces on Harbor Drive, you're at a deficit of about 6 from what you got. So I mean, we're sitting here holding up the possibility of replacing our Chinook Pier buildings over 6 parking spaces. To me, that's a conversation that could be solved at another time, but we're close. And we all recognize, we've said it many a time, that there's parking issues throughout downtown, but I think I was glad to see this plan get refocused on the original intention, which was rebuilding Chinook Pier, what's going to fit well there, and what's going to integrate well there with the rest of the waterfront, the rest of downtown. We got off on a tangent with expanding the scope so large because we wanted to study all of downtown that we kind of lost our focus, and now our focus is back. Our focus is back to, what do we do with that parcel? Do we put buildings back there? Do we reconfigure things that are there? There's a plan here that kind of makes sense, that creative, but put a lot of the functionality back. I think you still have, there's still kind of an issue of the supporting spaces for the waterfront stadium. I think there's some problems to be solved there yet. But the piece we're looking at here, I'm not seeing that our parking impact is all that large from where we are or where we've been. And I think that it's really not the reason you hold this plan up. I appreciate the problem solving that's gone into it. I appreciate the willingness to retrench and relook at the things that were important to us, and the willingness to back off from things like when we had the expanse of this all the way up to including the tipple, the locomotive, various other things which are pretty much worth keeping where they are. So I think that we made a lot of progress. We got a pretty good plan. I don't think the parking is the thing that really disqualifies this. And I'd like to support it because I think that it goes the right direction and gets us off dead center as far as putting something back on that site. It's been a busy site before. It's had a lot of retail there before. I think that what we're putting back there is really not that much more intense, but it's more creatively arranged. I think it's going to be a really good asset to our waterfront. And if we have to figure out where to find 6 parking spaces, we can probably figure that out somewhere. So if these numbers mean anything, and I know there are a lot of projections, a lot of things that are based on estimates of demand. So we're close. We're probably not perfect. We probably can find a way to solve those problems. So I guess that's my take on the parking, on the general direction of this plan. There's probably things in here that may or may not be implemented as imagined here. But you got to start with a vision. You got to start with something, and you've got to move along. And I think that we've been working on this for quite a long time, and that we've got a direction to go. And I'd like to go that direction. If we have to take a side trip here and there and solve some extra problems, then let's do that.
I do like the farmer's market.
The one we got or the one that's talked about?
No, the one we're talking about. It's pretty nice, but
that functionality is
but
still
the thing
built
of it
into
is, as we go, as Jennifer just stated, she wants to tie this into our master plan and everything else. And once you start tying things into that, you end up, people, we're all gone, think that's what has to be done, and so they follow it anyways. I like to be able to leave things open so that we can at least pick and choose as we go down the line instead of trying to put it into a master plan saying we have to do this sooner or later. It's not it. There's a lot of things that are not right on it, and I had a lot of people tell me the same thing. So I myself personally don't want to adapt it, don't want to approve it, you know? I mean, I want the plan, it'd be nice, we can pick things out of it we need to do at piecemeal. But I don't want to do tied into the master plan. I don't think that's the most appropriate way of doing it for it. I think it's good for councils to take a look at what they need to do. We've had a lot of other plans that we've had that we did that with, just picked a little bit here and there from.
Well, our master plan, correct me if I'm wrong, contains sub-area plans, it contains studies, it contains a lot of things, and a few of them have been built as written in the plan. Some of them have been elements that we've drawn upon, some of them have been the basis of zoning decisions. But I don't think that putting this, as making this a reference document for a master plan compels you to do specific things. I think it gives you, as I think, gives you a direction to go.
There's no compelling force to adopting this, what I would call a sub-area plan, into the overall city's master plan. It doesn't make it stronger, in my opinion. I think that if you wanted to incorporate it in by reference, like we did with the Centertown plan and the others, it's just another way for the development community and others to find it. Your description of taking bits and pieces as they make sense is exactly what this vision is about. That's what the plan is for, is to lay out a concept. And so when we get opportunities to potentially implement a piece of it, we can look at how that particular piece relates to the rest of the waterfront. And it's interesting, like, we had to have this balance in this plan where you have some prescriptive things like going down to the level of 6 parking spaces. That is an estimate, a thoughtful estimate based on all of the different components that the community wanted us to fit in this limited space. So we have to be careful not to put so much weight on the particulars of a number of parking spaces or a particular square footage of a building. It really is meant as a vision, and I think I needed to do a better job of explaining that it's a blueprint. It's not anything that you are required to implement exactly as you see in that schematic. I almost want to put a whole lens of blurring on it so you can see that we're not intending for it to be exactly that way. It's an illustration of one way that all these components that the community members were interested in could fit in that area and how it would impact the rest of that particular part of our community.
We're being asked tonight to implement that already with the master plan for the RFP.
Right.
But years ago, we made an investment, the city of Grand Haven made an over $1 million investment in buying those buildings. And then, of course, the vision was to have a clear view on it, so we own the buildings, we'd be able to tear them down when we wanted to and see that nice clear view out there. That was probably 2010 or whatever it was when we bought them. I can't remember exactly the year when we bought them. So now they're gone, we got that clear view, and now we want to go back to the same bad thing that we had before, where we're going to put somebody else on the property again and end up having to do the same thing over again. And the future council is going to probably end up doing the same thing we did again, spending more taxpayers' money. So I'm really disappointed on all this thing, to be honest with you. I'm done.
So is it your thought that we would eventually clear the site and have no buildings there?
Well, it was a clear vision at one time.
Because I never heard that one.
That was my vision of it when we took and voted for it all.
Because when we bought them, it was because the land lease came up and we had an obligation to either
Absolutely.
renew the land lease or buy them, and we kind of bought them.
So
And we were just about to have them paid off too last year when we had to tear them down. But I guess I wasn't thinking that the plan was eventually to have no buildings. I thought the plan was to figure out what would be appropriate to put back. And that's been my thought on this whole process.
Okay.
I guess I'm okay with the blueprint part of it, you know, the first part of it. I think the second part of it I'm not okay with yet, but the blueprint part of it I'm okay with, I guess. Because like Bob said, it's just a blueprint. And like Jennifer said, that it's just a basic blueprint. It's not going to tie us down to anything right now, so I'm okay with that. There's a lot of things to look at, though, before we go forward any further than that, more specific stuff. So anyways, okay. we'll hear the blueprint part of it.
Any other comments? Ready to vote? Okay, Linda?
Cummins?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Fritz?
No.
Dora?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. Thank you for all your hard work on this.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Next item. Don't go away.
Next item is to approve the Beyond the Pier Waterfront Master Plan request for proposals to solicit developer proposals for approximately 3.4 acres of the northern half of Chinook Pier, planned through the Beyond the Pier Waterfront Master Plan for a new multi-use market and for dining retail options along the river. The administration recommends approval.
Okay, I need a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Cummins,
Support.
second by Dora. Okay, this kind of moves us into closer to an implementation and the fact that we would be soliciting ideas which fit the plan.
Right?
Care to expand on that?
Yes. Excuse me. So, yes, it's a vision, and I appreciate you approving that. The reason why we have this request for proposals is for a few reasons. It was in the original scope when we went to put this all together and looked for consultants to help us through the process. We received funding from Michigan Economic Development Corporation to have this be a part of our scope of work. And it's another more detailed blueprint. So let's say we send out these requests for proposals and we get 5 interesting responses. These proposers, I'm expecting, are going to read through the plan. They're going to see what the vision is for that area. They're going to consider the limitations of the site and all the engagement feedback that was collected that led to this plan. And they're going to give you an idea of what it could look like. They're going to show you what their building vision would be for implementing a piece of this project. And you do not have to shake their hand. You do not have to agree to do anything with any of them. But this does give us an opportunity to visualize one of the more constructed pieces of this waterfront master plan. So it's the multi-use market, the farmer's market reimagined, and it's a commercial space with perhaps a restaurant anchor and some shops. So this is still, it is another step towards implementation. We're doing it because we have the funding, and I think we're lucky to be able to look at however many proposals we get and what they might see for that part of the community. And we can get feedback even more in a more concrete way from you all, from the Planning Commission, from the other boards that have been participating, and it'll just inform the process even more. If there's one that you really love and the community is really excited about and the money makes sense and all the other factors, you have that opportunity to move forward to the next step with them. But it's not an obligation whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. Okay, questions and comments?
Personally, I don't have an issue with putting this out and seeing what comes back for proposed development of the space. Honestly, I like the open areas and the opportunities that have arisen for various uses, like the Merchants and Makers Market that went on there a couple weeks ago. Is it possible we could see some open space that could allow things like that in some of these plans? Yeah, I'm sure it probably is. And we won't know until we get some of these blueprints back of what people, developers want to propose or think is a great use for the space that we can review. We can have public comment on it. We can put it out on the website like we did, with the original plan. People can look at it, give us some ideas, and maybe we can rearrange some stuff or what we like or what we don't like. So again, I'm going to support this and go out and see what comes back and look at it and see what we want to change or leave the same. So I'm good with it.
Anyone else?
I agree. I think, we set a city council goal to kind of take some action on this Beyond the Pier plan, and I think that's what this allows us to do, to meet that goal, to kind of see what's out there. I think one of the biggest things that kept coming up over and over again during the public engagement was that folks really liked the idea of indoor outdoor market. That seemed to be a really high point for a lot of folks. And so going out and requesting some potential proposals that would include that, I think is something that we certainly should pursue and keep our options open on. So I support that. From the beginning, the scope that we approved as a council and the timeline that we approved included a request for proposals to kind of wrap this thing up. We've set it as a goal, and I think that this is the next step to hopefully see some good proposals. So, and maybe not. Maybe we have to wait it out, but let's see.
All right, other comments?
Sure. I'll be glad to comment. Now that the plan has already been adapted, so now I have to put my other hat on and say I have to, move along with this. I'm looking forward to seeing what the proposals are. And also, when it comes time for any kind of contract, I want to make sure we have a better contract than what we had the last time, where we ended up spending over $1 million of the taxpayers' money to have the buildings torn down. So we need to make sure that when it comes to that point in time, that we make sure that we have all our bases covered, which wasn't at the last time we were forced to buy the building or go with the lease that they wanted. So we bought the buildings and we ended up spending taxpayers' money on it. So I'm looking forward to see what kind of proposals, if there is any. I don't know about restaurants. We tried restaurants many times down there and it never worked, but I'm looking forward whatever developer might want to come up with. Hopefully it's good, and I'll move forward with it.
Thanks, Mike.
Again, this is just another blueprint to get proposals and see what's out there, I guess. So I guess we can find out what's out there and what some developers got to say, but I'm not for spending a lot of city money on this right now. I think we have other priorities, but I'm only looking to see what's out there anyways, so I'll vote for this.
Well, this strikes me as being not unlike the next conversation we're going to have, which is the diesel plant. The diesel plant was one of those projects that needed some input from the private sector, what could be done, what were people willing to do, throw it out there, see what comes back. As Mr. Holcomb behind you was prepared to talk about, you sent out a lot of information for the private sector to say, here's what our vision is. Here's what our ideas are. Here's what the community would like to see. Here's the space you can use. Here's the problems. And then have people come back and say, well, we could do this, this, this. And maybe you come back with 5 or 6 or 10 or 1, whatever proposals. You might say, well, we don't like those. Then you don't do anything with them. But maybe you come back with some good ones. And maybe it's like, for example, with the diesel plant, we got some viable options. We're going to look further into them once we figure out which ones are worth pursuing. So to me, that's what this process is now. You're going to put this out, you're going to get proposals back. It may or may not be exactly what you had in mind. There might be something you never thought of, because there's other ideas than the ones that the 5 of us have. You just don't know until you ask, but at least we've put parameters around it. We've approved a plan that says, well, this is the sort of thing we're looking at and the sort of space we're looking for, and these are some problems we've seen. But what can you do that will fit into all those constraints and will be good for the community? So I think that's what I'm seeing here in this item, is that this request for proposals is what can the private sector make to fit our vision. And if it isn't anything, then we got to think again about where we're going to go with this. But if we come back with some neat ideas, then we can pursue those. So I think that's what we're approving here. That's what we're being asked to approve with this request for proposals. Is, what's the next step and what can the private sector bring to the table? And yes, we probably don't want to get ourselves tied into a land lease with a termination such as we had with Chinook Pier, where we find ourselves buying old buildings that were an inflated value because when the deal was first set up, that's the way it was set up. So let's not get ourselves into that predicament again. But I think we're smart enough now to not do that. At least, sure hope we are. So that's my take on this. I think this is a logical next step to take. And I don't think it necessarily binds us to do a specific thing that we're going to wish we hadn't done later.
Pat wants to say something.
Pat.
I tried to get in there, Bob, because I know you like to have the last word, so I apologize for
Oh, I'm
missing
sorry.
my
I wasn't even looking at
opportunity.
you. I was looking at Jennifer.
I know. I would
ignoring
too if I were
you.
you. But I did want to just point out about what Mike said. You know, I was sitting here in 2004 when we had it for 20 years at that point, 84 to 94 to 2004, unable to reach a final lease, so we had to buy it from. And as I recall, the city council said, well, we've got to have faith in a future city council to make good decisions, but we want to give them the option of leaving it open if they want to, you know, if we keep that building there. So what we did is we bought that opportunity. You bought them out, you paid it off, pretty much broke even at the end of the day, almost made a profit, but came up a little short. So that worked out pretty well. And I also want to point out, as you guys know, our city attorney at this time tells us we can go beyond 10 years. So likely, as we talk to these potential bidders, we can avoid that locked into a land lease that ends up costing us money by giving them more time. Because the idea is if they're going to build something of substance, they need time to recover that investment. And in 10 years, you just can't do it. So that will probably be the negotiating point that we come back with, is that, well, they can put in this investment in this open air market and leaving some open space for outdoor activities and things, but we're going to need a longer period than 10 years. And according to your city attorney, you're able to do that today. So that could avoid you putting the future taxpayer on the hook. Quite the opposite. They pay taxes throughout all that time, and you're never on the hook. You still own the land underneath, and they pay you for it, but they own the buildings. And then it does run out at some future point, and we would likely have a recommendation that you create a sinking fund so you've got some money come the end of that period to put it to bed or to reinvest in it. But again, you do the same thing that a city council did 17 years ago. Have faith in that future city council, which today is you. You know, they had faith in you that you'd make some good decisions, and I'm still confident. So I'm sure you'll do the same thing in whatever decision you make, whatever city council then, but you're not setting them up for failure by doing this 10-year repeating process going forward, where at the end of 10 years, I mean, they kind of had you over a barrel. If you didn't approve the lease, you had to buy the improvements at an appraised value that ended up being $1,050,000, which took you 15 years to pay off. So thank you. I just wanted to get that little piece out there.
That was a good last word to have.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Are we ready to vote? Linda?
Scott?
Yes.
Fritz?
Yes.
Dora?
Yes.
Cummins?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. Thank you. All right, next item.
Next item is to authorize city staff to proceed with the preparation of a buy-sell agreement with CL Lakewood to redevelop the diesel plant property on Harbor Drive, to preserve the building and receive minimum net revenues of $1 million from the sale. The administration recommends approval.
Is there any motion?
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Fritz, second by Cummins. Craig, you've come to the podium.
Yeah, I just want to apologize. I should have put him first on the agenda because he's got the furthest to drive, so I apologize, Greg, but I'm glad you're still here.
Not at all, not a problem. Happy to be here, really to follow Pat's lead in the materials that were sent to you about the CL Lakewood, and I really have to say the sense that we had 2 weeks ago of the direction of council. You didn't take a formal vote, but just based on the comments and maybe some other discussions Pat had after that meeting 2 weeks ago Tuesday, that there was a leaning. I should tell you, I've talked with both teams, the CL Lakewood and the Melching team. I talked with them before this was sort of determined. I talked with them after, indicating the same thing I'm saying, that there was a leaning towards CL Lakewood in the comments that you made. And based on that, Pat felt we should put forward the resolution for a serious discussion with the ability to make a decision tonight, not necessarily, but that you could move in that direction towards a buy-sell agreement, starting to encapsulate the ideas that they put out in their proposal, that you saw in their proposals. But it's a proposal. It's a little bit like Jennifer just described the master plan. Their proposal is half-defined. It's well-defined, but it's half-defined. There's pieces that we need to understand better. Pat and Jennifer and I have talked about this, that we need to understand better. But we feel we can do that in a relatively short period of time to get to a provisional buy-sell agreement with you, basically a contract that will provide, for example, 90 days of due diligence on their part to really iron out the details that you raised and had questions about last time, and bring something back to you to formally sign and begin to convey the property. So anyway, I'm here to really answer questions. Pat and I have talked a bit about this. The memo that was sent out on the 13th to you, giving you a little sense of the character of the items that have to be ironed out, and that we would work at with the CL Lakewood team. I should tell you that they themselves have had, even before my calls, they've had discussions with MEDC about potential funding potentials on their part for their project. They've also started into the SHPO historic tax credit conversation. Again, they have relationships back into those offices through other projects that they're doing in Michigan. So trying to get a sense of, are they geared up to move forward? And I got the sense that they are, with Pat and Jennifer and my support. I think we can move forward towards a buy-sell. That would be the functional next move for us to make.
And so action today, if we choose to take it, would generate another action because this buy-sell agreement wouldn't be approved today because it doesn't exist.
No, that's right.
And there's a bunch of details.
This is a less than 10-page document, but the attachment would be their proposal, the proposal you saw on June 9, that we would be referring back to the proposal and any other documentation that they might forward to you in this process of crafting the buy-sell. Yeah, but it's a 10-page or less document laying out the terms and conditions of the buying and selling of the property. I think Mr. Fullerton mentioned one thing that is on our side, the city side, which is the title, and the lot itself has to be squared away. And Pat and Jennifer and I have talked about that with surveyors that have helped the BLP. The property needs to be legally defined to be a little bigger because it's pushing on its boundaries into rights of way and so forth. So just as an example of the kind of thing that we have to capture in the buy-sell on our side, the city side, is that detail, and explain the process for ironing out those property lines.
Right, and of course the title has been city's title since the 19th century.
Yeah.
But the way it sits on platted parcel lines, clearly no one cared when they built the building.
Yeah, the triangle's like this, but the property is a little bigger, so we'll get that figured out. But
all right. So discussion by council.
So the thought is that over the next month or so, you're going to evaluate some of these questions that we already have, and obviously work on that actual agreement. I mean, are one of the more readily apparent items that you're going to address are some of the questions related to the type of use and how close their the walkability is of, because I hate when folks think that the city isn't willing to follow our own zoning ordinance as it relates to some of the requirements, including parking.
Yep.
And so if 400 feet is what it's supposed to be, it's supposed to be a walking distance, what are we doing to address that? What's the, and maybe the answer's already known tonight, I don't know. But that seemed to be a big concern that a couple folks brought up.
Yep, that's one of our concerns as well. We want to take a look at the exact parking demand that they're looking at and what their proposal is to utilize public parking nearby. It's been referenced, Mulligan's Hollow parking lot is the closest large city parking lot to that. And right now, if you walk on the existing sidewalks, it's too far. Per the zoning ordinance, it is a 400-foot walking distance. That's a requirement for the reduction. We'd have to look at, is there a way to get to that parking lot in a different way, physically building something different to get them to that parking lot. And then of course, the accessibility is important as well. The parking lot that's adjacent to the diesel plant building would have to be where the accessible parking spaces are provided for the primary use of that building. So those are things we need to iron out. Parking is always a big determining factor for projects. We have great ideas and then it comes down to the numbers, and some adjustments may need to be made. Something else I wanted to just clarify for the community and you is that this buy-sell agreement that you might approve in the future does not prevent or doesn't supersede the whole approval process that any other developer needs to go through. We still have to at least go to the Planning Commission for potentially a site plan review, most likely at least a special land use permit. Depending on how things lay out, you might need a planned development. So then that'll ultimately go to you as well. So in most cases, there's going to be a formal public hearing with the Planning Commission, if not also the City Council. So again, just one of those steps moving forward, but nothing's guaranteed.
That's excellent. The buy-sell kind of lights a bunch of fuses, okay, if you will. The fuses on the buyer side are all the things that we talked about, and you talked about, Ryan. The feasibility market work that they've done preliminary work. They have a sense of this from their other work. But they have to dig in for their own sake. There's risk factors they have to deal with. On our side, the land, the process that Jennifer will manage, the Planning Commission process, the site plan potentially, taking them through that, handhold with them back and forth, very much like you do with all developers. So it's not superseding that at all. In fact, it's really integrally connected together. So, I've been saying we need to understand the plan more effectively, the proposal. We need to understand the risks. We, as in we all. We, them, and CL Lakewood and us, and there are significant risks involved in putting their final plan together, building it, and then operating it. They have, I think, a pretty good narrative in their proposal about all that, but there's a lot more detail that needs to be fleshed out. I think the three of us need to be very comfortable bringing this back to you in a month, and then after that, towards Thanksgiving time, saying they've put together a great proposal, they're going to present it to you, here's the package, and we feel comfortable that they can get started with construction in early next year. And have a very good program, solid idea. They've identified an operator, probably of a restaurant, the venue, the event venue, and who's going to manage these offices that they're going to create. The other issue that came up was the condos up on Sherman, up in the substation area. I did talk with them about that. They haven't thought that fully through. That's part of our process that we'll go through with them. Their initial feeling was they'll do it in order to make it more economically feasible. It's not necessarily what they want to do, but the numbers work better if you can build 5 or 6 whatever condos up there, make profit from that to cross-subsidize into the building itself. So, but that's a detail that has not been fleshed out at all, and we need to go through that. Okay. But anyway, lots of fuses to light, nurture them, move them forward would be what we describe in the buy-sell agreement.
Certainly, yeah. And
typical contingencies, basically.
Yeah, well, that'll be a lot to work through, and if we realize at some point that, hey, it's not going to work, we need to know that, and move on. But.
And Pat has, I think, said it well. Instead of having both teams do that, if we're leaning towards CL Lakewood, let them do that additional work with us, but let them not both, and run it to ground. If it runs to ground and it doesn't seem to work for them, if we can't come to an agreement on a buy-sell, then potentially shift back. Okay. Anyway, that's the idea.
Yeah. Just a comment too. I know there's been some community members who felt like we didn't solicit, some meaningful public feedback about the site, but I think we sent out like a survey and everybody's water bill. I mean, everybody had an opportunity to, at least every household, we had online options, and pretty strongly folks really had a desire to keep the building if at all feasible. And I think all the comments that I've seen on social media, I've had a lot of other emails the other way saying that they really feel like we should keep the building if at all possible. And so I'm confident that that's really what the community's desire is, and then it kind of comes down to what is the potential use, and it sounds like this is kind of the direction that we want to explore further, and so.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Ryan. We did send out a lot there, and we got our normal. We have very few come back. This one here was a large number of people that actually responded compared to some of the other ones that we sent out before, especially over the years since I've been here. This is probably one of the largest turnout of people, what they wanted, to say what they wanted there. Right now, we just got to cross the Ts and dot the Is and find out, fill in the blanks, because right now, it's just, we don't know all that right now. But at least we can at least give them a chance to do the due diligence and do the work and see if it fits. If it don't,
Yep.
then we move on.
Any other comments?
Yeah, there was pretty close to a between 5 and 6 week period that city residents had the opportunity to weigh in. Mailers that went out on their water bill, city website had a place to leave comments on. I believe there was close to 800 people that participated in that. Pat did some work and kind of summed up all of the different comments that were made and direction that people wanted to go. Tear down the building. 3 people. That's it. 3. Of everybody that participated, that's how many wanted to tear down the building. 3. So is that a direction to head? Well, there was 800 and some people participated. But is that a direction to go? No, I don't think so. I think we need to listen to what people want to do and pursue what's going to come back from, CL Lakewood once they do some more legwork. We've all heard concerns tonight that people have had with parking, ADA being able to get to the site. And I think we owe them the opportunity to look at it and see what they can come back with and tell us, well, this is what we can do to resolve some of those issues, or nope, it's just not going to work out. So I'm going to, in favor of voting for this, just to give them a chance to, finalize it, do their legwork and due diligence, and come back to us with what they think they can do. So I think it's a good direction ahead.
I agree, we put it out to the public, and they overwhelmingly, they came up, they said they want to save the building, so. And we looked at proposals, and we figured that this is the best one to go with, so I'm good with it. We just have to figure out now how we're gonna get the parking that they need, and they're gonna have to figure it out, I guess. But anyways, either way, we're gonna come up with some kind of a solution for that. Hopefully we can.
Well, we talk a lot about surveys, and we talk a lot about petitions, and we talk a lot about how do you reach the public and send out postcards and all this kind of stuff. And the survey sampling, we always wonder if was it valid to extrapolate that to the people who didn't respond? Did the people who didn't respond just simply not care, or were they people that didn't really respond much? You never really know, but you get a sense for where the community is by how the responses are and how they read. And oftentimes it's the comments that come with those responses that are really telling.
Yeah.
I think there's a very significant sentiment in the community to do what we can to save that building. And I think that's a valid piece that came out of the survey, whether the numbers are large or small. I think that there was a lot there, excuse me, that tells us that's what a lot of people feel like. If it's feasible, if you can do it, then we should try to do it. And I myself have felt that way about this building all along, that if there's some way to save it and make it viable, and even if it's not the highest number of dollars coming back, it's something that's a community asset and people value it. And the value may not be in dollars, it may be in public pride, it may be in sense of community, it may be in a lot of intangibles. So the survey sampling, yeah, it'd be nice if you could get everybody to respond. You never do. You never get more than a percentage of people to respond, no matter how you do your outreach. And I'm sure that the town hall meetings we've got scheduled for the next few weeks will be similar. We'll get a sampling of people, and we'll have to try to read between the lines where everybody else is. But I'm pretty confident that this is important to the community. As far as which proposal is the right one to pursue, I think the one that's least risky, most likely to succeed, and most likely to fit the site is the one we've rejected, which is Capstone's, because they need to tear the building down to make that work. We've said that, well, no, we're not going that direction at least, not until we've proven that we have to go that direction. I think that CL Lakewood's proposal, it's imaginative, it's visionary. If you go into the building, which I've had opportunity to get in the building a couple of times now, and you see the soaring spaces in there, and imagine what might be. I think that that's kind of breathtaking, actually, in a way. It's the least modification to the building. So I think that it has those things going for it, but I also think it's the most risky of the proposals. I think that in terms of commercial viability, in terms of fitting on the site, in terms of traffic, parking and all that, it's got the most challenges. And so we're taking a larger risk to make that one work. And we're doing it in the name of making a better fit to the building and, like I said, the vision that they have for the building. So that's my feeling, is that if you looked at the way Melching proposed to modify the building, add more units to it, add a residential component or hotel component, I have the sense that that's probably a more solid plan in terms of probable success, but there's no guarantees. And so whether or not that would work, but that also includes putting another floor in the building, doing extensive work on the building, and adding more things off-site on the site.
And trying to fully use the lower level, which is
Yeah,
going to be
the lower level, those of us who have been in the lower level
going to be a challenge.
are impressed with how difficult that would be. I think all of us who've seen the foundations underneath those engines, because those are put in to absorb vibration, not to support them from sinking, but there's a lot of material to be removed.
It is.
And getting the engines out, unless you go in there with the big yellow knife and cut them up, I mean, it's going to be a challenge getting them out.
Yeah.
And they're basically scrap value. So, I mean, I think that if we're going to go and negotiate with somebody, let's go with the division which does the most for the building and has at least a chance of success. And there's big challenges here. I don't know that you're going to solve the parking problem. I don't know you're going to solve the access problem. You have the same challenges with the Melching proposal. I think that that's going to be equally difficult, or almost, to solve that one.
From my experience, top of the pile of risk in commercial ventures, right up there is restaurants. Both proposals have restaurants.
Yes, they do. And I think probably the safest bet would be the residential piece, which we've heard from the public isn't really that, isn't necessarily what the public's looking for, and modifying or tearing down the building is also not high on the list. So let's go this direction, see where it goes. If it doesn't go anywhere, we need to know that soon enough to react to it.
Shake it out.
And
It's a way to shake it out.
As other council members have said, they've got a proposal, they've got a background, they've got a narrative, they've got a track record.
They do.
And let's see where that goes, and it's certainly going to be different from what we've had. The diesel plant has been a quiet non-use for years. Prior to that, it was pretty loud, as has been noted. But prior to that, it was an industrial use, and it was a vital part of our utilities. Well, it hasn't been that for some time. So my feeling is that while I don't necessarily believe this is the safest bet, it's probably one that's worth pursuing. If anybody else wants to make any other comment. Otherwise, I believe we have a motion on the floor. Ready to vote?
Fritz?
Yes.
Dora?
Yes.
Cummins?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. All right, your work begins. All right, next item.
Next item is to approve payment of the bond anticipation note, interim financing or bond interest costs for the purchase of snowmelt boilers and appurtenant equipment and labor, charge costs to snowmelt operating accounts, and assign responsibility for expenses following the redevelopment of Harbor Island.
All right, need a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Fritz.
Support.
Second by Scott. Okay, Pat, would you like to explain this item?
I would. The Board of Light and Power invested in new snowmelt boilers that were placed on Harbor Island to, continue the system operating after they tore down Sims. The city council had sort of charged them with doing that, with coming up with a way to sustain that system as they go through this transitional period that we're still in. They took down the Sims plant and they replaced it with snowmelt boilers, and they used the bond anticipation notes to pay for that $1 million investment. They subsequently sent us a bill, sent the city a bill for interest, and I suggested that we hadn't had any final discussion on who's going to be responsible for those costs. We thought that was still an open-ended question with, my continued and often repeated attitude was that this is a three-way arrangement between the city, the DDA, and the BLP, and it never would have worked in the first place without that tripartite support, and it's not going to be sustainable without all three of us being a part of it. So I thought we'd have a 1/3 type understanding with any of these expenses. But we did get the bill for the full amount of interest. Mike and Bob, myself, and representatives from the DDA and the BLP got together and talked it through, and there seemed to be some support for paying this interest by the city. We would plan to pass that cost on through to the cost of running the system, like we do for electricity costs, natural gas costs, maintenance costs on an ongoing basis. The downtown property owners pay on a per foot assessment for that cost, but we reserved the right, as I believe it states in the resolution, that would be subject to a future calculation to spread interest costs according to responsibility. I think the end of it, charge costs to snowmelt operating accounts and assign responsibility for expenses following the redevelopment of Harbor Island. So there's some thought that there might be some tie-in with the BLP on Harbor Island, that they may be able to pay some of that expense. But in the short term, covering the interest was something that needs to happen, so I said, well, I'll bring it before City Council, because I don't think I have the authority just to pay it. So again, I thought it should be a third, a third, a third, but that was my point. I made it, and the consensus of the group seemed to be, let's just get this paid, and then we'll reconcile this as we go forward, because we know that the operating costs are going to be significantly higher than what they have been in the past as well, so we're going to have to find a way. And we all know there's some potential for other revenues that could come in to offset that cost of those boilers. And if that happens, then this interest can be rolled into that expense. So that's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay, thanks. As Pat said, Mike and I were at a meeting. Mike, do you want to talk to that?
Go right ahead, you started.
Okay, I started. Basically, this was paid through the bond anticipation notes. The interest needs to be paid. It's not really an electric revenue issue at this point. And so BLP has presented us with a bill for the interest. In the meeting that we had, we talked about, we felt that this was going to get rolled into the revenue bonds, or whatever the financing mechanism would be. And after realizing that meant that it would drive up the cost of those bonds because we'd be charged interest on the interest, we thought, well, that may or may not make sense, but if we just paid it and then come to an agreement later for a different split, we could possibly recover some of that, or if we didn't come to an agreement, we'd end up paying it anyway sooner or later, except maybe with less interest being charged in the long run. So that's kind of the, and Mike, if I've said that wrong, correct
No,
me.
it's pretty much is correct, and same thing that Pat was saying earlier, is that we came to consensus on it with the DDA and also the BLP and us as the representatives for the city, came up with the same thing as what you said. I'm not gonna sit there and repeat everything again, but it was a long discussion, and you're right. Do you wanna pay interest on interest? I mean, because that's what we're doing. If we don't pay this, we're gonna have to pay more interest on the interest that they, so this way here, we'll just pass it down like we are, and if anything arises that comes forward that we can actually put toward those boilers in the future, we can drop it down and renegotiate at that time.
Yeah. All right, questions and comments from council?
So you two obviously represented the council, and Pat was there. Who was there for the BLP and the DDA?
Let's see, Todd Anthus was there for the DDA.
And Jeremy.
and Jeremy was there. And let's see, Jerry Witherell and
Jack.
Jack, okay, Jack and Dave Walters. That was the committee that had been working on the snow melt stuff all along, except that when it first started, of course, the mayor was Jerry McCaleb, and I took her place on that committee. Otherwise, I don't think the makeup of that committee has changed. So those were the people at that meeting to talk about the snow melt arrangement.
Well, certainly, appreciate that the BLP has taken took the lead, somewhat directed wise, to find a replacement option for the snow melt. The council was well aware of that, and well aware of what they were putting in, and was updated and apprised of what the costs were gonna be of that as we went along. I guess I'd rather, there's, our city manager's belief is that, there's not a charter prohibition on them participating, whether, there's something that is on their site that they're using snow melt for or not. I'd rather ask their board, their full board, right now to pay a third of the cost, and see what they say, to see what their full body thinks, just like we're being asked right now as a full board to pay 100% of the cost. I mean, if the thought is that maybe a third and a third and a third could be a sensible agreement, I'd rather say, hey, BLP, I understand we don't want to pay interest on top of interest. You pay a third, we'll pay a third of this interest. DDA has a third of it passed on to them. And then certainly as we figure out whether or not the full capital amount is able to be paid off through diesel plant sale or in another way, then great. But I guess that's what I would rather see happen, that we actually ask their full board.
They won't, excuse me, Ryan, they won't give you the full vote on it. For some fact is, they can't really participate with the snow melt because their electric utility, it's not producing electricity.
Our city manager disagrees with that.
They have to, disagreements or whatever, but you have to get a lawyer to figure it out. The thing is, but their belief is that they're not producing electricity and they're not part of the system.
Two of their board members agree with that, apparently, it sounds like. I'd rather hear from their full board.
Well, they mentioned that at many of their meetings. Dave, right here, even told us that.
Who?
Dave, when he was here, talked about it.
I'm not going to comment on that, but their full board hasn't actually taken a formal action on it. I think it makes sense to have them pay a third of this cost, or at least ask them to pay a third of this cost. And if they feel that they don't have legal standing to do so unless they have some sort of project that involves snow melt, then we can cross that bridge. But unless we take it to them and ask, what if their full board wants to participate or not, I think that makes reasonable sense to ask the question. Instead of us paying 100%, and we're going to be passing on a tremendous amount of this to our DDA.
Nothing ventured, nothing gained, right?
Yeah. But a lot of this cost, if we're us paying 100%, how much of this is going right straight to our city street fund's going to be 25%.
Mm-hmm.
So 75% of this is going to our DDA of the 100% cost. That's a lot.
That's
So
operations.
I'd rather at least ask our BLP, hey, they're full board, you tell us. Are you willing to participate in this or not? So that's what I'd like to see happen. But one person.
I'll chime in. I don't think there's an issue with asking them. Never hurts to ask. I mean, the worst thing they can come back and tell us is no. So, to pose the question and ask their board if they want to participate in these costs, or if they would, I'm more than open to doing that. Matter of fact, ask them if they want to pay half of it. Hey. Start high. Maybe we can bargain them down to third. I don't know. But going back to them and asking shouldn't be a hesitation at all. And I'd be happy if they came back and said they'd pay a third, because honestly, trying to saddle the downtown merchants with a third of it may be a little steep for some. They're in line for operation costs, but we provided the system and they paid to help operate it. I don't know if they had to pay a portion of it up front, when it went in. If if the boilers failed, that, if it was on boilers, and, you know, just be part of upkeep that we would have to do. No different than anything else. You know, your street cracks and you need your street repaved, well, you pay for it the first time, and then the city covers repaving your street after that. You know, if you had to put in a new sewer line like we did for the Warber drain, well, we covered that. So you're looking at something here that says, okay, we have snow melt, we have a system that we provided, and however it got paid for, I wasn't part of in the beginning, but that system needed to have some repairs and some improvements made to it. I don't know if it's right that we go back and ask all of the, you know, the downtown merchants to, you know, to pay a portion of that. I guess that's something for further conversation down the road, but I have no objection to going back and asking them for money, so.
No,
I'll
I
support
don't either.
that.
I think the initial snow melt system was paid by their TIF, wasn't it, Pat? Is that how they got started? The boilers or the pipe, the infrastructure, the whole part of it was paid through by their TIF.
Mostly with a bond that is now being paid back with tax increment finances, as well as a $500,000 special assessment that was levied downtown, which paid probably of the snow melt. So, yeah, it was a $500,000 assessment of the whole $6 million project. So, you know, that was probably proportionally applied to snow melt expenses.
Yeah, okay.
Probably, you know, 1/12 of the cost was paid through a special assessment, the rest of it through tax increment finance bonds that are still being repaid today.
Okay, that's what my understanding was too. I wasn't here when that was passed either, but I just remember how it worked out, so. You and I were part of the contracts that, one of the street, but it was already a done deal when we got here.
Well, I think that's one of the first things we voted for was to go ahead and sign those contracts.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
You and I just got on council at that point.
Yeah, you're right, but it was pretty much a done deal when we got on it. So anyways, but yeah, that's how it started out. And so now, it looks like, because the infrastructure's not there anymore, the borderline power, so now we've bought these boilers, and I guess we have to shake out how it's gonna work out, but so right now, I got the interest, but I don't mind going after the borderline power and see what they'll say. I don't think we're gonna get anywhere with them, but we can give it a shot anyways. I think it's gonna come back after us anyways, but we can give it a shot.
Well, I think you're wasting your time.
Yeah, I think so
I
too.
think that the interpretation that Pat's alluding to in the letter we got was that if the BLP board chose to do so, they could participate in costs that somehow promoted the sale of electric power through economic development, and you could construe this as something, an amenity which helps sell electricity and promotes business because it makes the economy of the city stronger, or something like that. But it would still be something the board would have to voluntarily choose to do. They're certainly not compelled to, and it certainly does not generate electricity, and so it's kind of a stretch. I'm pretty sure that I know the answer is what it's going to be from the BLP board. And the fact is that we were anxious for them to go and build this system. We were worried that it wouldn't be online by last November.
Yep.
That it was like, hurry up and get those boilers. Have you got them yet? Are you getting the stuff put in yet? We got a tour out there. Okay, good, it's gonna work. And we fired it up, and of course, first thing it did was it iced up the intake and duct work and shut down. They fixed that, and so a couple of startup issues. But we were anxious for them to do that, and we said, well, we'll figure out how it's gonna get paid for as the rest of the projects evolve. And so they took out bond anticipation notes, and the interest is starting to come due on those. And the interest is clearly something for that piece of it for the snow melt is clearly not part of electricity generation unless they chose to interpret that as promoting the economy of the city. Okay, and they could choose to do that. I'm fairly certain they won't, but and I think it's a waste of time to go and ask, but because I think we need to pay this, and I think it's better than trying to tell them go roll it into your bonds, and that'll drive up the cost of your bonds. So I think that's a waste of money personally. But this is going to get paid by someone. Probably going to get paid, depending on how things evolve, you could go back and sort out the costs and get reimbursed for a portion of it possibly, depending on the final agreement. But it's due now. And like I say, just refusing to pay it or saying go finance the cost of this financing, I think is not gonna serve the people very well. Now, as to whether or not we spread all this cost on the downtown merchants, that's a choice we would make. We could say, well, we'll pay more of that. We don't have to pay just 25%. But the BLP really isn't obligated to pay this interest. Not until such time as there's an agreement as to how exactly the system is being paid for or how it's going to be used in the long run. So that's why at this meeting I was in favor of them just send us the bill, we'll settle the bill. Maybe we can adjust the bill at a later time, maybe not. Maybe if we have proceeds from whether it's the diesel plant or something else where there's some money out there, we can get this money back from those proceeds. Regardless, it's a bill that's due. Somebody's going to pay it.
It's true, but, you know, the BLP approved in their bond anticipation notes, the constructing, acquiring and installing hot water heaters or other heat sources for use by the city's snow melt system. If that didn't have a legitimate utility purpose, they shouldn't have included it. Their board approved that. It doesn't say that that has to be tied to any sort of combined heat and power plant. It doesn't say it has to be combined, you know, used on their parking lots or anything like that. In fact, there's, you know, acquiring and installing automated meters, you know, right after that line. I mean, it's not even connected even to any sort of natural gas, you know, RICE engine. So it's on its own saying that they approved monies to acquire and install hot water heaters or other heat sources. So the BLP didn't believe that that had any sort of utility purpose at all. They shouldn't have had it, from my perspective, in any bond anticipation notes. And that's the problem with coming up with a financing, how we're going to pay for things after, you know, we've told somebody to do something and then we're down the road and trying to figure out a bill. I think their full board should weigh in, up or down, either way, and we'll see where we're at, at least. And you know, they're an elected board too, so their full board should make the decision.
I understand your point of view. That it also means that the electric ratepayers would be paying a portion of this without any electricity being generated. Pat, your hand is up again.
Yeah, I'm just, would like to point out that it's not a final accounting. If you approve this tonight and we go ahead and pay that bill, and then we'd be paying each month when we get our gas and electric bill from BLP, they'd send us that month's interest bill as well, and we just keep paying that. And there are a couple things that we will know later that we don't know now. One is, does something get built on Harbor Island or not? Are they a customer of this system or not? If they are, that takes care of it. They'll be paying a portion of it because they can use those boilers to heat whatever facilities they might build out there. And we don't know if that's going to happen, but if it does, it sort of answers the question, and they will. Sounds to me, and it sounded to me at the meeting, you two guys were there, but it sounded to me like they would gladly accept responsibility to pay for about a third of it if they were using about a third of the capacity of these boilers, and they would reimburse us for this interest at that time. I don't know, do we gotta charge them interest on the interest we're paying? We'll have to talk about that. The other item is if there is a windfall from the sale of property that we talked about using that for the boilers potentially, it would obviate the need to answer this question or to go ask them that question, which is likely going to be a contentious discussion at the BLP board. I don't know that there's support for the concept, and it will take me. I've come across a number of references to them spending money to support the general well-being of the community as being a legitimate exercise of their authority under Michigan law and under their own bonds that they've issued. It refers to that sort of thing, doing public relations work, doing community investment, doing things to better the overall life and welfare of the people of Grand Haven is just like it's your guys' job, it's theirs too. So to suggest that somehow it's okay to charge property taxpayers money to melt snow, but not okay to charge electric users, well, you know, that's a discussion that you can have by making this request. And they can say no, you can say no. You know, and then what? You know, so I like the idea of waiting until we get that bill from them in May every year. At that point, we haven't passed the cost on yet to our users. We wait till that point, we ask the question sometime first quarter of 2022, at which time we'll have more information. We'll know perhaps whether or not they're building on the island, and we'll know what happened with the diesel plant. and it may render the need to ask this question moot. You know, you might not need to even ask it.
So you're suggesting that they're not going to pay the interest either, if we wait?
No, you pay the bill tonight, and
No, if we say we're gonna wait until next May,
No, my recommendation is on the agenda tonight, you pay it tonight as you discussed the other day, but we account for it and we hold it and we decide whether or not, and what bill to send them, and whether or not to ask them to pay a third of it after we have answers to these other questions.
all right, yeah, we said all along that paying this means it could still be adjusted at a later time.
Right.
But the question from this group is, should we just simply go to their board and say, what are you willing to pay? Am I correct? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I think you're being a little facetious on it, but.
Well, no, I think I'm stating exactly what I've been hearing.
Okay, well. I don't think it was whatever you're willing to pay. I think it
No.
was, are you willing to pay a third of this cost and be a partner in this, for the benefit of our, snow melt users, which benefits the entire community, and I think probably does have an economic benefit, so. More people downtown walking around, I mean, we can make all the arguments, and I don't wanna get into them tonight, but.
All right, so, we got a motion on the floor. Is there any more discussion? Are we ready to vote?
I'm ready to vote.
Okay, Linda?
Dora?
Yes.
Cummins?
No.
Scott?
Yes.
Fritz?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. All right, thank you. And thank you for the discussion. So that brings us to a report by city council.
I'll go. Unless you want to go, Mike?
No, that's okay.
No, I'll make it short and sweet. Of course, this past weekend it was Rock the Coast, where the power boats were here, about 140 of them, I think it was close to. It was pretty well packed, and if you were down there Saturday and watched the boat traffic, you couldn't even tell the Rock the Coast boat was coming in and out of there because there was so much boats down there. It was you think 28th Street was busy, and you think around Chicago and the Loop is busy. I tell you, our channel was probably the busiest I've ever seen down there. So it was nice to see a lot of people down there. And also then on Friday nights is a free concerts. I don't know if you'll be out there listening, but we have a great venue going on down there. Last week, Lauren Johnson, which was a local gal, it started out for us. It was really good. And then they had C2C, which was another act that came in from Rochester. So tonight I see we approved an additional concert down there. And I highly encourage everybody to go down and listen to them if you're into any kind of music, and a nice venue to sit down there. It was absolutely fantastic because as we were listening to music, the power boats all came in, so we had to sit and listen to the roar of the motors as they come in. As Tom was telling us about the roar of the diesel plant, I tell you what, those 1,600 horsepower motors in there, they're just cranking them up. It was pretty wild. But it was good. Also, the venue was so great. I actually, as they were singing there, I see an eagle come down and swoop down and get a fish and take off and head up toward the musical fountain area, and then come back over, and then went over to the sand dunes. So it was pretty neat. The town was packed. It was very busy, as I said earlier. The traffic was ferocious. People trying to get to the beach and trying to get out from the beach. It was really crazy. And if you come down to my street on Clinton Street, it's kind of like a shortcut sometimes. People come down my street and it's like a racetrack to get out of town. So, and so that's about all. One more thing. What about those Tigers, huh? Were you down there for the game, Pat?
I was there for game
Doubleheader?
one. Yep.
Oh, man, I tell you, that was fun to see Cabrera hit that pop-up and end up scoring a winning run. Can you believe something like that would happen in pro ball? That's it.
Okay. Thanks for the update. Danny, anything?
I'm going to say anything, but I probably I will. I've campaigned, 3 times before for this. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. My voice is kind of shot here, but I'll give it a shot. I've campaigned before for elections, and I've never had a dirty campaign like this one, when somebody will go door to door and tell people things that aren't true about me specifically. I've had calls from people that let me know what's going on, and but Mrs. Hendricks has been going around, and I don't know if she's not running for city council, but Board of Light and Power, but she's been attacking me like crazy. And one thing that comes back over and over again is that I'm poisoning her kids because I allowed the Board of Light and Power to send water through the plant to the river, and it's just nonsense. But anyways, and there's more to it than that. But anyways, I've never attacked anybody personally, and I've never had anybody attack me personally. But that's what's going on right now. And in fact, I got a hold of a legal counsel just because it was getting so vicious. So, but anyways, I just want to bring that up, that it's there's no call for that. You know, I mean, this is crazy. This isn't what Grand Haven's about, and that's not what elections are about. And I've never had to deal with that before, and hope I never have to again. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Danny.
All right, just real quick. No, definitely want good, clean, respectful elections. You know, we can disagree up here, but still respect one another, and you know, be kind about the process that we're in. I mean, it's, you know, we have 5 people elected. You're going to have different thoughts and views, and that's why you have a different variety of opinions that are up here. But we want to, as folks are running, to of course keep that same mindset. But a lot's been going on. We met with industry last week, and then we had a very lengthy environmental contamination-related meeting last week with the BLP, and so it's really encourage folks to stay engaged with that. There's an upcoming PFAS-related kind of Zoom meeting on the 28th. I'm sure some information will be put out about how to sign up for that and participate and get more information. And then on the 9th and the 11th, we have our town hall meetings where folks will be able to ask questions, hopefully get some answers, and provide us with some feedback. So that's all I have.
Okay, thanks.
I attended a couple meetings, Planning Commission via Zoom, as I said earlier, BLP meetings, same as everybody else up here. Had a pretty great weekend. Attended the concert at Lynn Sherwood Stadium on Friday with, you know, Mike and his wife were there, and a whole bunch of other people. It was actually quite packed. Stayed for the musical fountain show afterwards, and that was a full house. I mean, there was no room left to sit, so it's nice to see people coming out and enjoying that kind of stuff again. So also attended WAWL has music in the park at Volt Park on Tuesday nights and at Potawatomi Park on Wednesday nights. So I attended both of those, and they'll be having them again this week as well. So if you're sitting at home and need something to do, get out and enjoy the music, listen to what's going on, have a great time, and participate in everything. Bring your kids. They can, you know, go through the cake hop that Mr. McGinnis and his wife are putting on, the D&W cake hop there. So for the little ones, and everybody has a great time. Great music, lots of local talent, which is being promoted at most of it. So it's always nice to see some local folks out there and entertaining everybody and having a great time. So I guess at closing, I'd like to wish my friend Floyd a speedy recovery from his bypass surgery. I heard he's doing well, and the last I heard that he had this morning was doing good. So that's it for me.
Okay, thanks. I'd like to comment that I've appreciated the collegial attitude and the civility of this council. You know, it's been a pleasure to work with you guys on a lot of things, and I hope it continues, and I think that's how you do the business of the city. So let's keep that up, and I think that we respect one another, and we all have different opinions, and we make it work. That's how this community thrives. A couple of things I wanted to bring up. Earlier we heard during the call to the audience from Mr. Mark Peterson about a block party that he complained about. He sent me a complaint. I followed up with Pat and with Mr. Peterson, and we talked about his take on that. And my question to Pat was, you know, what's the process here for approving block parties or responding to complaints about them? And it sounded like this one just kind of went through, because it's always gone through, but whether or not the complaints were addressed, or whether or not there's any attempt to confirm whether most of the people on a block want a block party, or whether they're having trouble getting to their homes or being harassed, for lack of a better word. I think that those things need to be flushed out and made part of the process. Block parties are supposed to unite people, not divide them. If there's a problem with the way they're being conducted and implemented, then there's a process problem for the city to solve. So I would encourage Pat and Public Safety to figure out how to make that work better, so we don't get in these situations. Not everybody's always going to be happy about things that happen on their block, but it shouldn't become a problem for them where they live. So there's that. I did, before I came to this meeting, I spent the first half hour of an MPART Town Hall meeting. It's an online meeting. MPART, of course, is Michigan PFAS Action Response Team. And they are looking at a site in Muskegon County right now. They're going to be having a town hall meeting for Grand Haven. It's on the 28th, am I correct?
Yes, sir.
28th is 6, and it'll be an online Zoom type thing. It won't be an in-person town hall meeting. The half hour that I listened to before I came to this meeting was a lot of basic information and some information about the specific site they're looking at over in, I guess it's in the corner of Eggleston Township and Muskegon Township, a place where there's, they found some low levels of PFAS in a well, and they're sampling other wells, and they're getting the word out to people. Here's what we're doing. They're being as transparent as they can. So there will be something like that for us on the 28th, talking about what we've got in Grand Haven. It won't be great revelations or great direction, but it'll be the basic information and probably some ideas as to what their next steps are going to be. So anyway, that's coming up. I did enjoy the work session we had last week with the businessmen, and I thought good questions were asked, good answers were given. Not necessarily meeting of the minds on all issues, but we heard a lot of differences and a lot of thoughts. That's always valuable. And of course, we had our VLP work session last week, which was highlighted by a lot of the environmental challenges that we've got. And that's pretty much what I've got for my report. So, Pat.
Thank you, Your Honor. The meeting tonight on the Muskegon site is going to be very much like the one we're going to have. I did get a response from the MPART director, and I'm not sure if Abby Hendershot was the one that was doing the meeting or running it.
Yeah, she was running it.
Okay, so she said it's mostly much of the same information. She said she was a little disappointed in the turnout of the Muskegon one, and she said, I suspect I might get more people in the Grand Haven, and I'm pretty sure she will. They better buy the premium Zoom account for that one.
I might have been the only one on the call. I'm not sure.
Well, thank you for showing up. You made it worth their while. So the MML conference is September 22nd through 24th. I already heard Mike and Bob say they were planning to attend. If the other three are planning, if you want to let Linda know, and she'll get everybody signed up. On the plus side, we don't have to worry about hotels. We'll just plan on carpooling and those who want to go to that. It's always a very good opportunity for networking and education, and it being so close to home, I hope we can have a good showing there. And then finally, the mayor reminded us today that there's going to be an honorary citizenship meeting on August 2nd at 9 a.m. So that'll be the same day as your next council meeting, but 9 a.m. We traditionally bestow citizenship. Linda puts together a very nice package of Grand Haven stuff to present to our coasties who are going to be here for a tour of duty, and they're honorary citizens. And since I am an appointed official, am able to remind them all to register to vote, because they can do that while they're living here. They can vote. So I hope they are active participants in our local government, but this is an honorary gesture that's always a lot of fun, and this is pure city Coast Guard stuff. This isn't festival. This is the city of Grand Haven and the United States Coast Guard. So it's always kind of a nice ceremony. So if you're able to make it down there, and it is public, often there's a few dozen people that sit around the outside. I might be overselling that.
Yeah. Go for it.
But come on down. But that's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I can just add to that. I shook my son-in-law's hand coming across there one year. he was just, he got stationed here, and as he come by, I greeted him here, and in 7 years later, he ends up marrying my daughter. So, never know what happens, you know?
You never know, do you?
Never know. But it's kind of honorary, kind of neat.
Did you like pass out cards at the ceremony or
I
something?
told him, I
I've
said,
got
my
two
daughter,
daughters.
I said, yeah, my daughter Michelle. No, I did not.
Well, thank you for the tip. I've got 2 young single daughters. I'm gonna.
It's a good idea, hey, Pat, there you go.
Yeah, Ghosties are good people.
Now you know how it works. All right, well then at this point, we're gonna have our second call to the audience. At this point, members of the audience may address council on any item, whether on the agenda or not. Those addressing council are asked to provide their name, address, will be limited to 3 minutes of speaking time. Council will hear all comments for future consideration, but will not have a response at this time. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Deb Knott. I live at 25 Sherman, and I've been listening to the conversation tonight. And one thing that bothers me is considering, again, the diesel plant, but considering Mulligan's Hollow as a potential parking spot. Every weekend we watch it fill up, mostly by noon, and then they start parking all over the street, legally, illegally, everywhere. And so whether it's 200 feet or 400 feet, it's full. So that would be a real pressure. Unfortunately, I'm one of those who did not participate in one of your surveys. I wish I had, but I am not in favor of keeping the building with causing more traffic, more parking problems, if it comes to that. The traffic on Harbor, the traffic on Sherman, it's a huge bottleneck already, and it doesn't seem safe to me that if there's that much traffic and that much pressure in that one spot, how can emergency vehicles get around? How can people get around? I can barely get out of my driveway. When it comes to it, we've had people ask if they could park in our driveway. So it's just a real bottleneck, and I hope that whatever goes there does not contribute to that. And the Tigers are winning 14-0 in the 8th.
Oh, yes,
Oh,
thank
you
you.
didn't have to
Thank you
tell
for the
them
update.
that.
I was taping
Oh.
it. I'm gonna watch it when I got home.
Well, thanks for spoiling that for Pat.
Yeah, spoiler alert, no.
Oh, man.
Well, thank you for your comments.
Just real quick, again, Tom Fullerton, 2858 Jewel Court, Holland, Michigan. Yeah, the diesel plant, you know, I mean, parking. Just kind of curious about across the street from Sandpiper Conum, that there's a water plant there, parking there's a water plant there. There's, you know, the tennis courts up there. We saved the piano factory, you know, today's Harborfront place. I think anybody who has walked in there and seen those massive timbers, who's had a wedding reception, who shopped down there, who's seen that building. I mean, we did save the piano factory building. I don't think anybody has any regrets about that, saving that building. Agreed, it's massive, it's a different kind of building, it's an older building than the diesel plant is. But as I wrote in my letter about the plant, the diesel plant, if we could save, CL, I think, mentioned this. They talk about a light touch. It's complicated, no doubt about it. Like I said, it's way over my head. But if we could save what I call the bones, the building itself, and maybe at least one or two of its heart, like CL rendered in their drawings, you know, 2 of the diesels, one in the restaurant, one in the bar. I'd love to see that. If this building, I don't know if I could bear seeing that building torn down, demolished, razed. No. Lastly, I don't know, I noticed the water plant up above it was saved, the original water plant on Sherman up there, that brick building was saved. And, you know, perhaps parking, as far as the crow flies, there's a lot of parking up there at the Y. Granted, you know, there's a lot of people here in the summertime. Possibly something like a overhead crosswalk over Sherman, you know. There's a lot of traffic. It's dangerous to cross that street, I know, where the fuel tanks used to be. But anyway, glad it was unanimous tonight in your decision to move it forward with CL, it sounds like the ball's gonna be in their court now. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Wasn't going to get up. I'm Fred Knott, 25 Sherman. I'm married to the one who spoiled your game. I don't think it's a question of how close the parking is. It's a question of when events take place. And events usually take place on weekends. And weekends in June, July, and August, those parking lots are not available, regardless of how close they are to that building. I think it's a serious concern to consider that as an event space or a restaurant, because unless you provide parking on site, it's just not going to work, and you'll probably figure that out when CL comes back and says, we don't have parking, so then you're going to have to consider something else. The other thing I have a concern about, and I did write a letter to you and enumerated a number of things, but one thing is, I have a sailboat that runs on a diesel motor. It smells. And those 7 engines have been running in that plant for I don't know how many years, and I'm sure there's a diesel smell in there, and it'll never go away. And if I eat in a restaurant, I don't want to smell diesel. I think that's a serious impediment to their proposal as well. And the third thing I just want to mention, as I put in my letter to you, is those 7 engines are massive and they're impressive, and I get all that, but they've been shaking that building for a very long time, and I think CL's going to find out that there's serious integrity issues with that building as well. In addition to the diesel smell and asbestos and whatever else they got in that building, they're going to have a real challenge. So thanks for your consideration.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else?
Well, I'm here. So my name's
Yes.
Kurt Lettermoser,
Yes, you
117
are.
Washington. Obviously, the theme, parking, parking, parking. I will make one anecdote. Right behind the big green building, just because it's getting squeezed everywhere around, cars fly through there constantly. I saw Lieutenant Boyle the other day. I said, should we do a sign? And he goes, speed bumps. So every time we talk about parking, and I'll volunteer, I love your idea about the courthouse. I was thinking, why not use the library parking spaces on big event weekends? How do we address this? Because this seems to be reoccurring over and over. So I'd like to volunteer for any kind of committee that can look at creative ways, like how do we stem or help alleviate some of these parking issues that, like you said, if there's big wide open spaces, let's get creative and talk about it, because someone's going to get hurt. Someday in that back lot area, just the way people they're racing around to get a parking spot. I see it all the time. So just want to add that. Thank you.
Thank you. Last call. Okay, I'm going to close the second call to the audience. And our last item on our agenda is to go into a closed session. Linda, do you need to read this?
I can.
Okay.
This is to go into closed session for a personnel evaluation pursuant to 15.268 closed sessions, permissible purposes, Section 8A of the Open Meetings Act.
All right, need a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Fritz.
Second.
Second by Dora to go into a closed session. Any questions on the motion?
Nope.
Linda?
Cummins?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes?
Fritz?
Yes.
Dora?
Yes.
Manetza?
Yes. All right, we are in closed session.